San Diego State, SMU to the Pac-12. Will it happen? When will it happen? Will it benefit the Pac-12 and how, both athletically and otherwise? We got our buddy Tony Altamore on the line, strategy consultant who helps us in such matters. Tony, it's great to see you.
Great to see you again. Good to be back.
Absolutely. And
it's an interesting time.
Absolutely. It is. Tony, of course, for the last several months, the Pac-12 has been the center of the college football universe from a business standpoint and from a visionary standpoint of what the future holds, and all the speculation concerning what could possibly happen, who could join the Pac-12. Of course, we're focused on these two particular schools for good reason, and we'll find out why. And then also who could possibly leave the Pac-12. And obviously, there's been much speculation about that. So as always, we want to get to the truth. And we want to get to, when there is no necessarily truth, we want to get to the most likely scenarios and the facts and the information that's meaningful. So San Diego State and SMU, in regards to what they bring to the table. Of course, we just saw San Diego State make a Final Four run in men's basketball. That certainly wouldn't hurt. It's not football, but that NCAA tournament in March is a big, big deal and a big moneymaker. And if they can bring some needed value to the Pac-12 in regards to basketball, a once proud basketball product, of course, that has not seen a national championship game since 2006. But San Diego State, of course, shows that, hey, we could make that kind of run in March. And I know that's just a small, minute portion of all this, but it's interesting to see that that's an added value that maybe a lot of people didn't take into consideration.
Well, and San Diego State and Ohio State are the two, when you take a look at football and basketball together, over the past, they have all these, you guys see all the graphics they put out over the past like 10 years or whatever. San Diego State and Ohio State are the two best combinations of football and basketball in the country. And I mean, San Diego State routinely beats Pac-12 schools in basketball. So I guess one of the things where we should really start is one of the things that we were told by Pac-12 presidents, apparently, is that they, at some point earlier in the spring, authorized the conference to do deep dive explorations into 4 schools. We know that they were San Diego State, and we'll get more into this I think that's actually a done deal. SMU, which we know that, the commissioner went and visited. We, from our Pac-12 show here on the Voice College Football channel, continue to project that San Diego State and SMU will, sort of election projection style, will join the conference. The next 2 are interesting. The third one is actually Colorado State. And some of you guys don't know, we found out, some of you guys don't know this, but Colorado State has actually been a candidate to join the Pac-12 going back to like the 1990s. When, back when they were a powerhouse. Colorado State is a phenomenal school. I mean, Colorado State does more research than like Oregon and Oregon State combined. Maybe more than Oregon State and Washington State combined. They do a ton. It's a phenomenal school. Their football has not been what it was kind of in the 90s, but a great school. The fourth one is very interesting. The rumors are basically that it was either Tulane, Rice, or Kansas. I don't know which of those 3 it is. I've heard all, people sort of source it. I don't want to say sources. That's a stupid, fake Big 12 word. It's sort of been ruined for the world by some of these fans lately. But contacts have, at all of those schools, have sort of claimed that it's them. I don't know which one it is. Those are all certainly schools that have previously expressed wishes to join the Pac-12. Several of them have previously applied before. We don't know which one it is. I don't think it's going to be either of them. Folks, John Wilner, John Canzano, guys who know most, Stuart Mandel, a lot of them have talked about this. Wilner, even today, very much continue to project that San Diego State and SMU will be probably the 2 12.
Got Tony Altomare on the line, strategy consultant that joins us on a regular basis and hosts our Pac 12 live chat show for most of the season. And we appreciate Tony stopping by. I thought that this was an apropos time to attack the topic because, of course, San Diego State and SMU have been front and center, and there have been strong indicators all over the place of why they will be the new members of the Pac 12.
Should we talk about San Diego first?
Yeah, let's talk about San Diego State and what they bring to the table. And as you mentioned, strong football product that's won 3 conference championships since 2012, and they're playing in a brand new football stadium as well.
Well, and not so. Things about San Diego State is, first of all, let's talk about why they were never in the Pac-12 in the first place, because they are 30 years ago. But they were sort of a victim of circumstance that now makes them very fortuitous based on the circumstance, and that is location. So as of the southernmost Pac-12 team in the state of California is Stanford. So for the bottom 6 hours of the state of California, from a driving standpoint, there's no Pac-12 team. San Diego State is the only available major football program in all of Southern California right now. And Southern California is a tremendously important strategic area for the Pac-12 in terms of presence for not, and when I say recruiting, I don't care about football recruiting, because football recruiting is whatever it is today. Is this whole, like, you hear a lot of people talk, oh, well, this is important for recruiting. Yeah, not really. What it's really important for is having a presence for student recruiting. So every school in the Pac-12 recruits a tremendous amount of their student body from Southern California, and a tremendous amount of their alumni are in Southern California. Their donors are in Southern California. Having a presence in Southern California is strategically essential to the Pac-12. One of the things that, so we actually, Mark, I don't know if you remember, we talked about this, I think 2 days, day after USC and UCLA left. And we said the Pac-12 would probably want to continue to have some presence in LA even. And when they played, George Kliakov then went on and talked about at meetings about, well, maybe we'll play games at SoFi. So having that strategic presence in Southern California is tremendously important. Arizona State just opened a campus in LA. They took over the old LA Herald Examiner building, really cool historical building. It's like ASU California Center. So strategically, that presence in Southern California is essential, and San Diego State is the option. Now, under the old TV deal, under the old sort of TV world, USC and UCLA being in the Pac-12, the Pac-12 already owned the Southern California TV market, including San Diego. And so San Diego did not add any financial value, as silly as that sounds, because they already had all the TV homes and the cable package. San Diego didn't add $1 of value, and so that's part of why they weren't there in the first place. Now they add a tremendous amount of value, not only just financially, probably with how their TV deal is going to work out, but most importantly, strategically, they add that huge element. And then as far as fit goes, athletically, so first of all, San Diego State is already a member of the Pac-12 in a couple of various sports. So it's not really new to them. They'll probably move from being an affiliate member to a full member. Academically, San Diego State is a phenomenal school. Now, people, like older people, realize that San Diego State has, assuming they join the Pac-12, they will be the third most elite school as far as admissions goes, behind only Stanford and Berkeley. They actually have more competitions than Washington, and San Diego State has more competitive admissions than any school in the Big 12. So it's a phenomenal school. And part of the whole weird structure of California, the California Higher Education Master Plan of 1960, is that the Cal State schools do not issue PhDs. They've now amended that. They can give, I don't know, they give them like 10 or 15 a year. It's something, it's a tiny, so they don't have the level of and degree, even though they do a lot of research, they don't quite have level of graduate research because they're not having PhD students. So San Diego State, when you look at their ranking, they rank anywhere from 60 to 50. So it's sort of like they're, depending on your metrics that you want to use, they're kind of like very similar to Washington, which is really good, or very similar like to like Oregon and Oregon State, which is also good, but not like, not quite as gangbusters academic in the rankings, because they get dinged for that and not having graduates, not having PhD students. But at the same time, because they don't, you're not really worried about it. And they are they should be getting their R1 designation probably this year is one of the rumors. I don't know, we'll see. But certainly, they fit the bill academically, they fit the bill athletically, they fill that TV gap, and the most importantly, really fill that gap. So it is as no break can come, and certainly this Final Four run, I think, really just helps them. Again, we 3 months ago, I continue to believe that the deal is basically done, and they're just waiting on the final pieces. Now, we're told by San Diego State people, again, I have not seen their Mountain West, whatever the bylaws, paperwork, or whatever, that actually the real kind of crux date for them is June 30th, because at that point they'll owe the Mountain West like twice as much money to leave. So certainly stands to reason that they should have everything done by then. I'm a little surprised they didn't have everything done in time for their basketball tournament. But one of the things that people do not understand, the Pac-12 universities are a little high and mighty in their universityness. And the last thing in the world that any of them care about is what like Big 12 fans on Twitter think of them. In fact, I kind of joke that like they probably are just like, this is joking, but that they're delaying this TV deal just to tick some of them off. Now, just for a quick history piece, by the way, when the Pac-12 added Stanford in 1959, they didn't actually tell the public about it for 2 months. They just didn't tell the public, didn't care. They're just, so you have to understand sort of the president's mindset of the Pac-12 is very different. And then there's another element of the Pac-12, and Mark, we've talked about this a little bit about history, but the Pac-12 was set up in a very different way than every other conference. And that is that it was set up in 1959 with the idea of total presidential control. There was so much crazy drama in the 1950s with athletic directors and faculty athletic representatives. The Big Ten had some of these fights in the early 90s, if you remember. But the Pac-12 had them in the 50s. And then when they put together the new conference, they said, this conference is under presidential control. And the commissioner, who at the time wasn't actually even allowed to call himself a commissioner, he was the executive director, because they did not want a commissioner, because a commissioner is in charge, and this conference was under presidential control. So it wasn't until 1986 that they allowed the commissioner to take the title commissioner. Before that, he was the executor. The first decade of the conference, they didn't even call it a conference. They called it an association, because it was like presidential control. So part of the reason you don't hear from George Kliavkoff is because he's not the head. He's the manager. The presidents are the head, and the presidents are in charge. And so that's why you always hear us talk on our Pac-12 show about this, because in other conferences, they want their to be like a carnival barker. The Pac-12 does not want the president to work for them. And you see that with George Kliavkoff. You see how he defers to the presidents. You see how he doesn't give interviews very often, and instead the presidents do. And that it's not an accident. It goes back to Admiral Hamilton. Literally goes back to 1959, and it's just a very different mindset. I actually think with the Big 12, Bob Bowlesby, by the way, was the Stanford athletic director before he took over as Big 12 commissioner. He was a lot like that too. He was much more kind of in the background, but the Big 12, they lost their figureheads with Texas and Oklahoma, and so now they want a guy out there sort of being P.T. Barnum troops. which is very different from the Pac-12. They don't want that. The other thing that they want the spotlight on the schools and not on the conference. And it's just a very different mindset. But again, it goes back to 1959. And I think you see that in how they handle, like, it's about the presidents, and the presidents don't care what like random sports writers think.
And that maneuver that you alluded to back in 1959 that may be taking place now is obviously going to have far more impact in this social media age, and withholding that kind of news. Just think about it, anybody out there, that if in the end you're going to have the victory, and you've had taken a lot of shots in social media and otherwise, then it becomes even sweeter if you really want to play the game well, that you hold off maybe announcing for a little bit.
And the other thing, by the way, guys, I personally think it's kind of dumb. Like, I joke that the Pac-12 is taking its like social media strategy from the NSA, of just saying nothing and don't care what it thinks. And my Tony opinion is that that's really dumb. I've actually tweeted at them to be like, you guys, there's actually a PR firm in DC that I think they should hire to fix this for that, because I think they should be firing back. But their attitude is, we are Stanford, or we are the University of California. I don't know if you guys know this. The University of California itself as a whole does something like 8 times the amount of research as the entire Big 12 added together. So like they're not, like, again, Big 12 Twitter, like, these are people who have protests outside their offices. They've got faculty up in arms about this. They've got fundraising people dealing with this. They've got massive multi-billion-dollar healthcare systems that they're the CEOs of. And, just, they really don't care what Big 12 Twitter thinks. And I think you see that in that. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Tony, you're breaking up, and so I apologize stepping on you. So hopefully,
oh no, sorry.
No, you're good. And I think you're obviously getting to the crux of what the issue is in terms of public debate, and that's the academic portion of this versus the athletic or football portion of this, and which wins. And I think what people struggle with is, number one, they're football fans, they're sports fans, so they are fixated on that. And I get it. Look at my channel. I get it. Although I want the truth, and I want the facts, and I want real conversation, and I want to get to a point where we're thinking about this intellectually and logistically, and not just based on our emotions or what we would want to see happen, or based on just what we know because we watch football every Saturday in the fall. But at the same time, we've seen the moves that have been made across the sports landscape in terms of realignment and expansion, let's say over the last 20 years. Not all of them have been these juggernaut football moves like a Nebraska to the Big Ten, but most of them have been football beneficial to the conference that's bringing those schools in. So it does have the look of football driving this.
Well, and if you take a look at this, by the way, this sort of it's the thing is that the people don't understand. It's not football or academic. It's both. The conference wants to have both, and they want a school that's going to excel at everything. And most of them do. When you get down into Conference USA, Conference USA has been kind of desperate.
They're just trying to survive. Yeah,
they can get. Yeah, they're trying to survive. One of the things that people don't understand is, if you and this sort of shows it here, particularly when you take a look at the Pac-12, these are just surreal institutions to whom all of this football stuff is really rounding errors in money. And the Big Ten, by the way, sort of is a little bit like that also. You're talking about giant academic powerhouses who partner together and value their relationships together on this kind of stuff. And so when you're in that stratosphere, just, and I was excited when Central Florida got into the Big 12, but like Central Florida doesn't move the needle. Iowa State doesn't move the needle to these folks. They are looking at Stanford and Cal and Washington and Arizona and Arizona State. And they're not really interested. And so they've actually rather harshly said things like, we're not going to the Big 12. The Utah AD mocked it. They put out their statement, and as far as the presidents were concerned, when the president spoke, and if Big 12's Twitter doesn't like it, that's too bad, because the Pac presidents spoke, and they're like, oh, well, we don't believe them. Okay, well, they really don't care, because they never cared what you thought in Central Florida anyway. And when you take a look at this, I mean, just look at the differences here. When you think about a school like Utah, you think about Arizona, you think about Arizona State, you think about Colorado. I mean, in Pac-12 world, they joke. They're like, these stupid Big 12 fans don't even understand, like, when they say 4 corners, they're only talking about 3 because they're not talking about New Mexico. You're forgetting the 4th corner. The 4th corner is New Mexico, guys. That's what 4 corners is. It's the 4 states. So it's kind of just a silly thing, because none of these schools were ever going to move. Now, you guys remember, Mark and I talked last summer. I actually talked to some high up contacts at Arizona who told us in the immediate days, I don't know, 3-4 days as USC and UCLA left, Arizona they all talked to the Big 12 and decided they weren't going to go. And that hasn't changed since last July. Again, you're talking about fans pushing a narrative, but none of these teams were going to move. And so people really needed to listen to the presidents and see. I mean, they're pretty clear. They sent George Kliavkoff to SMU, and he had his little photo shoot at Moody Coliseum and everything. Again, these numbers you're looking at the screen. This is the kind of stuff that matters to them. They want AAU members. They want research money. They want and boost their own endowments. They want to fundraise, and academic rank matters. And to the folks who say, well, it doesn't matter to me. Okay, well, you're not going to join the Pac-12 then, because to them it matters a lot, and it always has. Again, going back to what the Arizona schools did to try to join. When they tried to join the Pacific, a lot of these schools tried to join the Pacific Coast Conference back in the 50s. And they've been, some of them have been fighting for years. Utah first joined them in, I think, 1956, and they finally got in 2010. So, is Utah going to be like, whatever, we'll just move? No, guys, they worked on that for like 70 years, 60 years before they actually got it. And let me, there's another, switch to another screen. But as far as SMU goes, SMU is a little bit different in they really bring a great football focus that I think would be really valuable to the conference. They also bring that is really unique in their connection to Dallas, which is a new market. It's time zone. It really brings a lot to the conference. Now, one of the things about SMU, just to be clear, SMU is an independent school. They were formerly affiliated with Methodist Church. They are a much like USC, Duke, and Syracuse are, former schools that were run by the Methodist Church and now are completely independent. SMU is completely independent. They actually went to court because the Methodist Church didn't want to go. So they are an independent school. Now, the Pac-12 does not have a problem with schools itself. In fact, the original Pac-12 were to include a Catholic school, and enough. USC is a former Methodist school. You need to meet the Pac-12 values that involve things like acceptable inclusion, meet the Pac-12 values of academic freedom from dogma in the curriculum. Things like that are tremendously important to the Pac-12, especially things like academic freedom. So a couple schools that do not have academic freedom for their faculty. None of those schools will ever be considered for Pac-12 membership. One of them is really bitter about it. A couple of them are the other side of the country, so it really doesn't matter. But it's a mindset of you more so than anything else have to want you as a school, because remember, when they go to admit somebody to the conference, they are putting someone in a position to vote who is going to vote to affect their students. And that's true of any conference. So, for the Big Ten, one of the things when people look at the Big Ten and they were like USC and UCLA, like what people don't realize is USC and UCLA are very tight in with the Big Ten presidents. They fit what they want for universities. And so this is here. You look at somebody like San Diego State President Adela Torre, phenomenal university leader, also has 3 degrees from Cal Berkeley. She's kind of exactly what you want in there. SMU's president has been there for 30 some years. Tremendous. Again, somebody that you would trust. That's some in realignment. And let me just in San Diego, you don't have
Tony, just so you're aware, sorry to cut you off. Just so you're aware, I know you can't do anything about it, but that you're breaking up quite a bit. So we may ask you to repeat a few things.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
So go ahead. So internet is being sketchy tonight. I must have Joey's internet somehow. So this is athletic revenue versus total academic budget, and you can really see how the conferences kind of stay in groupings together. And you can really see sort of where the Pac-12 fits and why it is so attractive to a lot of these schools. And you can even see again, I don't know if the rumors about Kansas are true or not. It came from Kansas people. I don't know. I don't have any inside connections at Kansas. But if you take a look at where Kansas is relative to the Big 12, and you take a look at where Kansas is relative to the Pac-12, you could see why that would be something attractive to them. And you could see sort of where San Diego State is here, very, very much why they are interested in moving up. Oh, sorry. Am I back now?
We got you, I believe.
Oh, can you guys, Mark, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm back. I don't know what internet tonight. Thank you, State of Florida. Stephen, we're looking here. Somebody's asking about UNLV. UNLV is, and John Canzano's very UNLV, Fresno State, and Boise State are reportedly not currently candidates for the Pac-12. Again, that's just sort of what we're told. Again, we continue from our Pac-12 chat show group to project that San Diego State and SMU will join the conference. At some point. We thought it would be before media day. Before the media day for the conference basketball tournament. It now seems like it's going to be sometime, maybe May, maybe even early June, sometime before June 30th, supposedly. But so I guess it really doesn't matter who the other ones are. But we're told that it was not UNLV, that there have been no conversations with Fresno or Boise.
Tony, do you think that the Pac-12 media rights deal and the finality of that getting signed is affecting the timing of SMU San Diego State?
Yes. So I think that so one of the things that they've said is that they are not going to announce the expansion until after they announce the media rights. And I think that that's three reasons for that. The first one is just sort of their own reasons and process of them saying, this is the order, we need to get everything hammered out. We'll make the final vote and then we'll do the expansion. The second reason that I think they're doing it is because, darn it, they said presidents, and when they say they're going to do something, they do it. That's just, I think, just from an attitude standpoint, their view. And the third reason, which I think is the most important, from the standpoint of somebody who's put on like big events and stuff like that before, you want the event to be about the new school. Like the announcement at San Diego State, when San Diego State joins the Pac-12, it's going to be a monstrously important day, really for the entire California State University system. Again, going back to that higher education master plan, going back to 1919, when the UC Regents did something really shady and seized two of the normal schools from the Cal State system and took them and made them UCLA and UC Santa Barbara. Like, there have been these conflicts for a century, and the bringing of San Diego State and Cal Berkeley together is going to be really important to the whole state. Like, the symbol is monstrous. To San Diego State fans, as they join the Pac-12, it'll be really important. And so you want that to be about the schools and not a million like Dennis Dodds like raising your hands and asking stupid questions about the media deal. So from that end, I think it's important that you sort out your media stuff, even though everybody knows you're going to add San Diego State and SMU probably.
How much, because a lot of people believe that this is a huge factor, how much, or if at all, does this media deal affect what could happen to the Pac-12, whether that's incoming members or outgoing members, which of course you have just settled in terms of nobody's leaving the Pac-12. But I got to think that,
and the presidents have settled that.
I got to think that the Pac-12 in each individual school, Tony, has some type of line in the sand, or at least they're hoping for a certain number to come back.
So the number actually is fairly irrelevant, being brutally honest. And you even heard the Arizona State president say nobody's going to leave for a few $1 million, because part of the whole integration of what's called the PAC ALC, whatever the academic leadership consortium, whatever they call it, where they actually pool research support services and a lot of that kind of stuff, matters so much more to them than anything that has to do with the conference money. Because again, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, not like a few million here and there. So the number is fairly irrelevant. Like, it's going to be fine. They continue to say, and again, I'm not in the rooms, I'm not in negotiating rooms, I don't pretend to be. I will tell you that, Dennis Dodd, those people are absolutely not in the rooms. The presidents continue to say that they're going to have a higher number than the Big 12 anyway. Whether they do or not, fine. Again, we've talked about this on our PAC show. The number doesn't really matter because it's going to be fine. It's not going to be zero. Again, remember that the Big 12 only gets $20 million per school to add, and it would cost a Pac-12 school about $4 or $5 million a year in travel. So extra if they join the Big. So you're talking about, can you beat 16? Yeah, you can beat 16. Can you beat 32? They say yes. I don't know. We'll see. But there is no, the line in the sand number is a pretty irrelevant thing right now. Because again, you're talking about presidents who think in billions and Big 12 fans who think in, pennies. So nobody's going to trade the $200 million of research ties that are linked to Cal's research support services for a nickel of nonsense from Ames. Now,
so of course, Tony,
on the other hand, the fear 12, and Big 12 fans do not understand this, but the fear in the Pac-12 is that Cal and Stanford are somehow going to find their way into the Big Ten.
Yes.
Notice I did not mention anyone who has 0 national championships, but the fear is that Cal and Stanford are going to find their way into the Big Ten, and that would destroy the Pac-12, because remember we talked about the importance is the tie to the state of California. And the importance is the research support services that they share and pool that are tied particularly through Cal Berkeley. And the prestige that comes from Stanford, the presence in the state of California, I mean, just everything about the conference, the nexus of power of higher education in the West Coast is in Berkeley and Palo Alto.
So,
and
Tony,
so the fear is sort of like Yep, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Tony. I'm because of the delay or the lag. I'm. It sounds like I'm cutting you off. I apologize.
No, not at all.
So before we move on to, I want to hit a point that you're hitting on here with Stanford and Cal. But before we do and leave the Pac-12 media rights part of the conversation, I got a point to make, and a half point and half question is, so obviously they still want to come out of this deal with as much money as possible, even though it's somewhat irrelevant. So is it more important for the Pac-12 to establish itself on the right platforms at the right times? Is that more of the consideration that might be holding all this up and not necessarily a dollar value?
I don't know. What we sort of been told, and again, I'm not in the room. We sort of go with what we're told. Is that the process is really slow because particularly we were told that it's probably there's Amazon or Apple, one of the two will probably play a big role in this of some kind. And that they are just really slow in how they do things. I'll tell you who else is really slow in how they do things. The Pac-12 universities. They go at the speed of universities. I mean, the president of Arizona is in Kazakhstan for 2 weeks. Opening a new Arizona campus in Kazakhstan. So, if that sort of says something about the speed that these folks are dealing with things, this is not their number one priority. It's probably not their number 10 priority as presidents. And so it's getting done, but it's getting done at the speed that they get it done at. As far as, whether I think that there's a lot of sort of overplayed pearl clutching and hand wringing from people that are not Pac-12 fans. They're gonna put it on a platform that's gonna be fine. I mean, the real sort of takeaway I think that we see when we actually read from folks that are talking to people in the room. Dennis Dodd's not talking to anybody in the room. Brett Yormark not in the room. Is that they'll be is that they're expecting they'll be fine. I don't know exactly which platforms be. I mean, remember, Pac-12 used to have games on USA. Those were they did a really good job with those. We believe that ESPN will probably play a role. We believe that one of Amazon or Apple will probably play a role. But whoever it is, it'll be fine. Again, Big 12, they got about half their thing. I mean, they have about half their games or 40% of the games or something on ESPN Plus. Streaming is the future, and so having games on some of those platforms is going to be good. And they'll have it on somewhere. But again, the hand wringing. Again, you guys sort of look at this. These are folks thinking in billions. And all this hand wringing over a dollar or two or a nickel of nonsense from Orlando is not the way that presidents of universities think. And remember, they run the show.
They run the show, and you are pulling this from, legitimate connections that you have. When I made a point the other day, and again, I made it very clear that this was not me speaking from a place of having contacts. This was just me saying, this is what's typically true of negotiations, number one. Number two, this is also true of this situation. And it's very simplistic. Number one is that the longer negotiations go on, usually the more desperate of the two parties is placed in a more difficult and more vulnerable situation, and has to at some point grasp at something because of the time crunch in place. And number two, obviously, when you look at Apple and Amazon, well, if you really look at all the potential media partners, none of them need the Pac 12. ESPN's got plenty of football inventory at this point, so does Fox, and especially Apple and Amazon. They're not in the sports market right now. They want to be, and obviously they're negotiating because they want this property, but it's not the end of the world to them because it's not their current business. Whereas for the Pac 12, obviously they need a media rights partner or two or three.
Well, I mean, first of all, 12 burp the Big 12's budgets as universities. So one of the things when we talk about need and desperation, they're not desperate for $30 million. They're not desperate for the difference between $25 and $10. So, just to be real clear on that, there's sort of this mindset, I think, that there's this desperation, and I don't think they're desperate. It's I'm not a TV rights person because it's going to be fine. I think that a lot of the hand-wringing, and some of this, by the way, guys, is paid PR. I mean, we're going to talk about this, and I mentioned this with Mark. We're going to talk about after they finalize this deal. We're actually going to show you guys some of the evidence of how some of these PR firms actually actually try to spread fake information as messages and text messages and email. How these organizations actually try to spread fake, bizarrely, which is pretty ridiculous. There's a lot of the media folks talk about the fact that ESPN, what are they going to show? New Mexico State at Wyoming? Or are they going to have part of their deal be the Pac-12? They have no content on the West Coast right now. So the TV people say they need West Coast content. Again, I don't pretend to be in that room, but I can certainly tell you that nobody in Lubbock or Ames or Orlando are in that room, and they're not affecting the decisions. But again, I'll defer to the folks. But listen to the people who are actually talking to people in the room. One of the funniest things is the sports media, the Sports Business Journal people, they just can't stop uttering nonsense when they clearly don't know what's actually happening. So listen to the people that are actually talking to people who are in the room. That's who I listen to. I don't listen to anybody who's not actually speaking to people who are in the room dealing with the stuff because they don't know anything.
Tony Altimore is here, as he typically is when I need him to clear up on and get to the facts and get to the truth concerning the situation. And of course, with SMU and San Diego State being talked about heavily for months and months and months, and considering San Diego State's recent run to the Final Four and the national championship game, and of course, the media rights deal still being anticipated to be completed at some point here. Thought it would be a good time to grab Tony and have him clarify some of these things concerning specifically San Diego State and SMU. And we appreciate Tony being here. Tony, back to Cal and Stanford. Yes, that move to the Big Ten fascinates me. And
well, that's the fear. I mean, so the Big Ten has been super clear that they're not taking anybody. And the Big Ten is also commissionerless. There's 3 Big Ten schools that don't have presidents right now. And the Big Ten cannot state more clearly. I mean, you guys hear Jim Williams, who's been very active on Twitter. He's a great guy. Actually supposedly talked to some Big Ten people who reiterated once again, they're not taking anybody. The Big Ten could not do anything more than put out a giant flashing closed sign on the front of its headquarters in Chicago. So no one is going to the Big Ten. And John Wilner talked about this a couple months ago, where he said the fear of the Pac-12 is not the Big 12, because none of them are interested in actually going to there. The fear of the Pac-12 is that they would lose, particularly Cal and Stanford, to the Big Ten. And the Big Ten has said that's not happening. Certainly not at least not in this media cycle. So that's not really a fear that is going to happen, but it is a fear that sort of, resides in the back of in these folks' minds. And it's part of why they don't just come out and say, like, they're not going to say, first of all, they don't say nasty things about their colleagues. Presidents work together. These presidents probably are the ones that put a kibosh on some of the nonsense. But, these presidents work together. And so, they're not going to say nasty things about the Big 12, but they're not interested in going. And that's why they've said, we're not going to the Big 12. You saw the president of Arizona State say, we've never had serious conversations about actually moving. And none of them are going to move. But the fear, and this is a big thing to remember, guys. The fear is really, more than anything, is Cal and Stanford. That is who, when you look at the Big Ten and people who understand the Big Ten and know the Big Ten, we remain surprised. So we talked with Mark a year ago. I'm still surprised the Big Ten didn't take Cal and Stanford when they took USC and UCLA. I remain surprised by that. But, again, their teams are kind of stinky, and the Big Ten requires that you be in a much better state, I think, football-wise and basketball-wise. And they're trying to fix that. They've got new football and basketball coaches going on. But just that would sort of be the fear. Because remember, if you lose the academic piece, then all of a sudden now you're just a normal conference. If it's going to be a normal conference, then you can deal with other normal conferences. But the thing about particularly the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and I'll see a lot is that you have a much stronger alignment that's not just about being a sports conference.
All right, folks, appreciate you being here to talk about possible conference realignment and expansion. And of course, we wanted to start this discussion and have with San Diego State and SMU, which we believe is going to happen. And it will all play out here very soon, of course. We think.
And we'll, well, one of the things, though, to remember, too, and again, this is why I think they should have, I'm not defending why they're taking forever, because I think they should have done this all forever ago. But your risk is that, and John Wilner talked about this as well, anytime you just have time, things can happen and chaos can occur. So the sooner they get it done, the better.
And I'm going to be a bit redundant here, but just to clarify, SMU and San Diego State, this rights deal does not necessarily mean a whole lot to them either in regards to comparing the billions of academic dollars versus the millions of athletic dollars. So much like the stance that the Pac-12 universities are taking.
Well, and for SMU, for any of these folks, they need their shot. They want to get into the club. SMU. SMU is like, the characters on Dallas all pretended to go to SMU. The real life people Dallas is based on all went to SMU. So like, money is not the problem money's never been the problem for SMU, but SMU needs the shot. And personally, I hope they get it. I think they'd be a great fit for the conference. I hope nothing goes wrong for their sake, for all my friends from SMU's sake. And same with San Diego State. I mean, these are two schools that both deserve their shot.
Hey, Tony, here's a question coming in that you have addressed in the past from Shoelace Sooner. What are the actual rules to stay a Power 5 conference? I don't know the details.
Actually, so the phrase is A5, which stands for Autonomy 5. It's actually Shoelace Sooner. Hey, Shoelace Sooner. Shoelace Sooner is awesome. Boomer Sooner. Great guy. So it's actually an NCAA legislated designation that gives special powers and special independence and rulemaking powers to the 5 conferences. So one of the funny things is, first of all, anybody, and we've talked about this before, but anybody who ever says any of those, and we said this about the Big 12 when they were in a panic a couple of years ago, those conferences are not going to go away no matter what happens, because they have special powers that they will back as they need, any of those 5 conferences. So, if the ACC lost people, they backfill. If the Big 12 loses more people, if the Pac-12 loses people, they'll backfill. Because those powers by the NCAA Yeah, you'll see the phrase A5. That's the correct term for autonomy 5. And sort of the media sort of calls it Power 5. Is, sort of the new playoff deal has what the top 6 conference champions are automatically qualified. So you have some things with college football playoff, but the big thing, and this is why like none of the Power 5 are going to go away, because it's an NCAA legislated status.
All right, everyone. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. If you have any particular questions to ask Tony or myself, please leave them in the chat. This was my main goal, was to clarify the SMU and San Diego State situations and why they make sense for the Pac-12, and just to confirm that this is all but done, and we are waiting for an announcement. Yes, it's not.
And I'll tell you, Mark, I think the sooner they get it done, the better. But they're taking their sweet time.
All right, Tony. Certainly, if there's anything else that you deem important, I would love to hear it. But otherwise, this is why I dragged you on tonight.
Always a pleasure.
Tony, thank you.
Have a great night and fight on.
Appreciate it, Tony.
Thank you.
All right. Great stuff from Tony Altimore again. And basically what happened today was, in my review of what's online, and I do this just about every day because of what's happened in conference realignment over the last 2 years, is every day I look around, I look up conference realignment, expansion, I look up those key terms, I try to find what could be discussed, what if it's meaningful. I'm not going to be somebody who's going to be on here every day and kind of provide overkill. That's just not how I approach it in regards to what we do here at the Voice of College Football. And I'm also not going to chase anything down that's speculative. It's all speculative to a certain extent, but if I don't find it meaningful, factual, based in facts, maybe it can't be factual to this point because nothing's been decided that's been announced, but based in some type of logic and fact, then I'm not going to be producing content. But I do look at that every day. I do searches every day to see if there's anything meaningful. And a couple of weeks ago, for example, I produced 2 or 3 videos. I did a couple live streams involving conference realignment because the Arizona and Arizona State presidents were talking at that point, the Utah president as well. So I proceeded to go ahead and produce some content there. But it's something that I look through each day. Now, today, I found a number of references to the San Diego State NCAA basketball run to the championship game, and the timing of this announcement maybe being imminent, and there being some surprise by some legitimate media, John Wilner in particular, that this announcement didn't come during the culmination of San Diego State's basketball run, because even though this is from a sports standpoint, football driven, we know most of the money's in football. Certainly the NCAA basketball tournament, both men's and now women, we will include, is a factor, is a sports event that moves the needle. So I thought, I'm seeing all this about San Diego State and SMU, and we've been talking about those 2 schools in particular for months. I've posted videos basically saying this is where San Diego State and SMU stack up in regards to them adding value to the Pac-12. You can check those videos out. We've talked about football performance. We've talked about overall athletic performance. We've looked at the endowments. We've looked at the size of the schools and the alumni bases. We've looked at the TV markets and all of those things. to size up again San Diego State and SMU. We've looked at and produced videos in which we've looked at how those teams have performed against the Pac-12. And of course, SMU, it's not real pretty against the Pac-12, but of course that program was wiped out for years and years and years following almost receiving the death penalty at one point in the late 1980s. But for San Diego State, they have fared extremely well in football against the Pac-12 and have won 4 conference championships since 2012 in the Mountain West. And the Mountain West has been, again, largely competitive with the Pac-12 at the top of the league. So we have kept track of this day to day to day. And again, I'm only going to go forward with any kind of information when I see something that seems interesting or something that seems meaningful. Certainly, I've speculated in regards to how these conferences may be formatted once there are moves made. And there's a whole lot of fun that we have in terms of my recommendations, my proposals on conference scheduling and formatting, and we will continue to do that. All right. Also, here at the Voice of College Football, we are close to releasing our 1 through 133. We're up to 133 teams in FBS football. We are set to release our 1 through 133 program rankings for 2023. I believe the rankings are right about where we want them. Maybe we'll give everyone a sneak peek. In the meantime, we will open up the phone lines while we're here. Why don't we go ahead and talk to you? So please join the show if you would like to talk some college football. Anything is on the table. So I have left the link in the chat and you can join us. In the meantime, I'm going to look up my work on program rankings. So what we're going to do, not to confuse anyone, in the next few days, I'll say, we're going to release our 2023 program rankings. And then we'll wait 4 to 6 weeks. And again, not to confuse anyone, we will release our all-time rankings. So let's see who we've got down here at the bottom. Yeah, just to give us quick peek. So before I receive any kind of comments on this, these are not rankings. They're not final rankings. They are placeholders. James Madison just had a very respectable 8-3 season against Sunbelt competition, so I do not have them ranked third to last. So these are just notes that I'm taking, lining up. I take these rankings extremely serious. I don't spitball it. So I'm sure that you guys, I know that many of you watch all sorts of YouTubers who spitball all sorts of rankings that are very thin and paper thin in regards to any kind of logic or research or knowledge. But we don't do that here at the Voice of College Football. We deliver meaningful rankings that are based on solid information. So we will release these in the next few days when I get these finalized. Again, our 1 through 133 program rankings. And then we'll do the all-time rankings coming up. We are pretty close to May, so I'll let everyone know that once we get to May and get past all the spring games, that May is going to be debate month. It is going to be the great debate month here at the Voice of College Football. So if you have a college football debate that you would like to hear waged here at the Voice of College Football, bring it. So for example, let's see, what do we have here? What do we have here? Our debates. Did I at all? I thought I was making a list of debates. Oh, yeah. So those are a few that came to mind. Of course, the Ohio State-Miami Fiesta Bowl game and the final play of not the final play of the game, but the 4th down pass interference call. We could have a debate on that. Ohio State-Michigan, the marking of the JT Barrett run. A lot of Ohio State here. they tend to get into controversy, don't they? Ohio State, Clemson, that 2019 college football playoff game, the Georgia game in 2022, that Miami Notre Dame game that eventually decided the national championship in 1988. I also like the Florida State Notre Dame situation in 1993. Florida State, Notre Dame, if you're not aware, if you're too young, like our next caller is, but he's probably aware, being the college football student that he is, that Florida State and Notre Dame both went 11-1 in 1993. And Notre Dame won the head-to-head, but Florida State was awarded the national championship. Jeffrey, what's going on tonight, sir?
How you doing? I'm glad to be back on here. It's really interesting, you talking about with the Pac-12 and, San Diego State and SMU. Obviously, they had to do something or they haven't done it yet, but if they do it, they had to do something because you're losing USC and UCLA to the Big Ten, so you had to make a move. But I've always thought it was interesting, like with the ACC, they're the Atlantic Coast Conference, but you have now Notre Dame and Louisville, and now you've got
Notre Dame. Notre Dame.
In basketball.
Okay.
In basketball,
we don't talk about basketball here.
Well, I know, but and then you've got the Pacific Coast, Pac-12, and now you've got a Texas team. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I know it's branding, so you can't change it. Just like the Big Ten's now the Big 16, and then the Big 12's been 10 teams for years. It's all messed up, but still, it should not be the Pacific, conference if you have a Texas team.
No, and that's something that by now most of us have kind of corrected in our thought process, because anytime we've kind of dreamed of a realignment and expansion, you think geography. That's the first thing I still have to correct myself and think, you know what? No, it's almost wide open now. There has been talk about the Big 12 running out to UConn and grabbing the Huskies, and all, in Tulane, of course. Well, Tulane, shoot, if they're going to go to Florida, they might as well go to the Northeast and grab Connecticut. So it's all out there on the table. And really the first glimpse we got of this, Jeffrey, if you recall, was Boise State being wooed by the Big East a long time ago.
Yeah, that's insane. That should never happen. Shouldn't even be thought of.
Yeah.
I mean, you had Louisiana Tech in the WAC for a long time, the Western Athletic Conference. That didn't make sense either. And they had to travel all those places to play all those teams.
I gave a sneak peek, and since I certainly respect your evaluation of these teams, once I release this 1 through 133 program rankings, I'll be curious to get your thoughts. And again, I don't want to unveil too much, and I know I'm going to have somebody that's going to grab hold onto these rankings, because these are not released, folks. So don't say, oh, they shouldn't be 127. Okay, I haven't finished it. I'm just taking notes right now. So anyway, but I love doing stuff like this. So I'm eager to get this released and get some feedback, and we'll release the video, then we'll do a live stream, and we'll have people call in and let me have it.
I think that, people love rankings anyway. It's something like in our heads about ranking teams, programs. It's just wired for football fans and basketball fans. They just love that. And no ranking's perfect, as you've pointed out tons of times, especially the AP. The coaches poll, they're flawed for sure. They're not even close, especially the preseason rankings. So I've always thought, like your top 25 that actually makes sense is one of the best because of the way you do it. It's very objective. It's not perfect either, like you always say, because there's no ranking that's perfect. So everybody's always going to debate and complain about it, but that's what makes rankings great, is because people can debate and complain about it. Looking at this right here, what you've got, I like the rankings. They're very objective for sure. You got to give more props to like an American Conference team with South Florida. That league actually was tough this year versus UMass. UMass was horrible. So that's why the 2-1 and 11s aren't next to each other. So it makes sense. I think they're very good.
Again, these are not final rankings. I'm just showing people my work a little bit at home. These are not, do not take these to the bank. They are not completed.
I'm sure that I still like them.
This is just a sneak preview for everyone. just to get people pumped up and excited to debate that.
Oh yeah, the chat's probably going crazy right now about it. I mean, I think that you look at a team like UConn. I think that they're even though they were 6-7 and they didn't do good in the bowl game. I thought they were really impressive. Jim Moore did fantastic. So that was a good improvement there. I think a lot of people get confused with how some people look at a team and they don't know like their history or how bad they've been in a long time. So it's kind of like if you look at Nebraska, if Matt Rule can get Nebraska to 8-4, for a lot of Nebraska fans, it's not a big deal because Nebraska is supposed to be that good. But that would be huge considering how bad Nebraska's been for the last decade. That would be a major accomplishment.
I think it would be a decent step if he could just get them to a bowl game. They went 4-8 last year. They have not been to a bowl game since 2016. This is going to be 7 seasons coming up. Get them to a bowl game.
Yeah, Nebraska football, I have a big soft spot for them because to me, everyone compares Indiana basketball and Nebraska football because they went down around the same time and they literally have had some of the same streaks. Indiana basketball hasn't been to the tournament since 2016, which they've gotten back. Nebraska football, get back to a bowl game. I want to see Nebraska back in a bowl game. Or Indiana football, that'd be nice as well, but maybe that's more of a stretch, but who knows. But back to the Pac-12, I mean, I think that San Diego State, that makes complete sense, obviously, for the Pac-12. It's in California, and it's a great program, like you said as well, and everyone else has mentioned. Them and Boise State are at the top. Both are fantastic, so I completely agree with that. SMU, again, because like you said, and I've just geography, I wish the geography was the way it used to be where it made sense. So just SMU to the Pac-12 doesn't make sense, but I do get it because like you said, so many famous people have graduated from there. They have a lot of money. I mean, the scandal in the 80s was insane. I mean, everybody knows SMU. So, I mean, it's a good move for what they need right now, but it just geography-wise makes no sense. And I'm going to miss SMU being around other teams that they normally play. It's just going to be kind of messed up than playing Oregon State and Stanford.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy to think about. Yeah, the Pac-12 making its way to Texas, but yeah, we're already seeing this all over the place, and of course, the Big Ten, coast to coast here, starting next fall.
Yeah, everybody keeps talking about USC playing at Rutgers. And it's a conference. I mean, you might as well. It's like the geography's gone, like you said, and literally we're just at the point where, like you said, it's all about the money, which is unfortunate, the TV money, and it doesn't matter like who's in the conference is what makes the money. And I mean, just because the geography doesn't make any sense at all. You just USC playing at Rutgers, they have nothing in common at all in any way. I mean, they're polar opposites. I mean, they're culturally they don't make any sense. It's just academics doesn't make it. Everything's different. That's why the Big Ten was a Midwest conference. It wasn't even supposed to be Rutgers and Nebraska and Maryland. It was in the Midwest, Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan. So even Nebraska was a stretch and Rutgers, but at least that was kind of okay. Now I've just blown it open.
When I was your age, Jeffrey, there was no Penn State in the Big Ten. Columbus, Ohio was the furthest east that the Big Ten went.
Which is crazy. I mean, for me, I think of Penn State as Big Ten because I never was born when Penn State wasn't. But yeah, for people that remember when Penn State wasn't, it's crazy.
Jeffrey, can you imagine when I was your age, and I'm taking again, let's see. Yeah. When I was your age, South Carolina, Louisville, Penn State, Syracuse, Pitt, Boston College, Miami, South Carolina, all those teams and more were independents. There were tons of independents. There were like 30 of them and like major teams playing independent schedules.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was kind of cool because it gave you the freedom to have, the flexible schedules and you weren't tied down to something. I mean, obviously, I think probably most of those teams made the jump because of money to the bigger conferences and everything. But Notre Dame's somehow the only one that hasn't done it yet, and they can still make a lot of money off of it because they're a major brand. And I think a lot of it has to do with their institution as well. just they don't think they would fit in a conference, and they don't want none of their roots getting taken away. So we don't know whenever they're ever going to do it or not. But yeah, like you said, that would be crazy. I kind of wish I could see football like for 1 year, and I'm sure a lot of people would too that are like younger, just see the conferences the way they were like in the 80s or 90s. See like the Big Eight, the Southwest Conference back, the Big East Independence. Like I wish I could see that just for 1 year. It would never happen, but it'd be cool.
I'm just letting Salt of the Earth know, who posted a comment that Mark walked to school uphill both ways. He realizes that, I'm that old. So I let him know. Also in the snow. It was in the snow. So it was even more difficult than that. I love the idea that Mike has here. I just jotted this down. I think this is great. So I did post a video a few years ago that, again, I love doing these kind of videos, Jeffrey. I did a video where I looked at every elite program and the last time they were down. And I defined what that meant to me. And so, you can come up with your own definition, but mine was that there at least had to be a 3-year period when they weren't competing for the conference championship. And when I say competing, I meant like in the last 2 weeks of the season, they were out of it. And I did a video and I took Ohio State, Michigan, Florida State, anybody who's been elite in the last 20 or 25 years. I took about 10 or 12 schools and looked at the last time that any of them were down. Mike's idea is do a video on all the lowest points in each Blue Bloods history.
That's actually an interesting thought for sure. I mean, Ohio State's is a while back. It's been a long time since they've been bad. Unless you count the Luke Fickell year.
But that's only 1 year. Like I don't consider like 1 year.
Yeah.
Like when you're top 5 in the country and winning the Sugar Bowl and going 12-1 like Ohio State did, and then you go 6-7 because Luke Fickell's there, and then the next year you go 12-0. Like that's not being down. Like that's 1 year. To me, that's at least my thought, that I came up with a 3-year period. And if you go by that definition, most Ohio State fans would say Ohio State was down in the late 80s because they had some marginal seasons. But even then, Jeffrey, they didn't go 3 consecutive years without playing for a conference championship the last weekend of the season. You would have to go back before Woody Hayes into the late 40s.
Wow.
The last time that they were down far enough to not be playing for a conference championship in late November.
Yeah, Ohio State is probably the most consistent football program in history, because you mentioned Clemson was down for a long time before Dabo Swinney, and they really weren't an elite program before that. They had moments. Then you look at Alabama, between Barry Bryant and Nick Saban, they had some ugly years. They were really bad some years. And tons of other programs have had bad. USC, I know if Tim and Tony are in chat, are going to be mad. They've been bad for a while. Not Nebraska bad, but they've been pretty bad. But like you said, Ohio State is just the one program that just keeps churning out successive years. They're always good. And it's crazy. I just think that they've dominated the Big Ten. I mean, it's their league. That's why Michigan fans, again, I don't want to upset any Michigan fans, but you don't own the Big Ten yet. You've won it twice, but you don't own it yet. It's still Ohio State's league until you.
I think it's a great debate. I think
It's
that's a great debate, Jeffrey.
It's kind of like Alabama versus Georgia right now. Georgia's won the last 2 years. Have they taken Alabama's pedestal? But Alabama's been great for 15 years with Nick Saban. Is it taken away? It's even when Dabo did it twice, had Clemson taken it away. I still think it's Bama's for now. If Georgia keeps winning 2 or 3 more in the next 5-6 years, you can make that argument for sure.
Braylon Edwards, I just saw this on Twitter a couple hours ago. He made a statement that Ohio State's program is falling apart. That was his quote. It's falling apart. This team missed a field goal or they would have won the national championship. I'm pretty safe in saying that. And they're falling
a player's
apart.
Injury away from winning it. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, you think about Georgia this year. I said it all year long. The only 2 teams that could beat Georgia when Georgia's playing their best was Alabama and Ohio State. And that's true because Ohio State beat them, and then Marvin Harrison goes down. I mean, they were beating them, and then they lost. And then you look at Alabama; they could have beaten them on a good day. I don't think any other program could beat Georgia when Georgia was playing their best. I mean, they steamrolled TCU because Georgia just played their best game of their life. They just dominated from wire to wire. And it's unfortunate. I'm glad TCU made the playoff, but I mean, the talent gap's so large. That's why people like March Madness, because you get Florida Atlantic and San Diego State in the Final Four, because talent doesn't always get you wins. Alabama basketball, Brandon Miller went 3 for 20. But in football, when you have 5-star offensive and defensive linemen and they're coached up right, they're going to dominate the 3-star linemen of TCU. It's just no competition.
Our buddy Ryan here, I've never seen him before, but Ryan, we appreciate you being in the chat, so thank you so much for that. I'm guessing Ryan's a SEC fan to be making this comment about Big Ten fans talking football. It's cute.
I mean, I'm in ACC country, and my ancestors love the SEC. I mean, I've talked about, I'm kind of a team fan anyway. But I mean, Indiana has always been my soft spot team, and I like Carolina because where I live, and North Carolina and Alabama is my ancestry team. So I mean, I like a lot of teams. The Big Ten is just fun to talk about because they're always second fiddle to the SEC, just by a little bit. So it's just funny because everybody's already talking about the SEC. You got to prop up the Big Ten a little bit. I like the debate. That's what makes football and sports in general so much fun.
Yeah, we were doing a show this week, and I had a handful of people trying to tell me that the SEC wasn't the best, and I just threw up my hands, Jeffrey, to say I would love if we could have this debate. I wish we could have this debate, but we can't have the debate because it's not debatable right now. It's just not debatable. And I will rip off any metric or stat that needs to be explained that the SEC is the best conference. And I'm not going to say it's not close, but it's not close enough for it to be debated. And what would have been great is if Ohio State would have beaten Georgia, and if Michigan could have won that game, then you've got an all Big Ten national championship game. And then I don't necessarily, because of that, think that the SEC would not be the best conference still, but at least there would be a huge, we could probably debate that all off season if that would have been the scenario.
Oh, for sure. I think the biggest thing that makes the SEC just the best conference, because like you've made videos on it and talked about like the draft picks. That's not the be all and end all, but you look at the draft picks. The SEC dominates the draft, even at the bottom rounds. You just see an Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Texas A&M at 5-7. They were a bad football team, but they still were so talented. That's why they beat LSU by 2 scores. They were capable of being 9-3 or a 10-2 football team. They should have been that based on their talent. They didn't go that, but you look at the Big Ten, a 5-7 team in the Big. Indiana was 4-8. If you have Texas A&M on a good day, play Indiana on a good day, that's a blowout from Texas A&M. They're going to beat Indiana badly. It's not even close. So I think that the depth of the SEC, when those teams are playing at their best, is not close.
I totally agree, and it can't be proven, but I think any really logical college football fan who watches the games and who understands the game, at one point, I lined up all the teams in the SEC and the Big Ten from this past season, and they're really good games. They're really good matchups. And then the SEC, just the bottom of the league, when you're matching up Rutgers and Northwestern, like Northwestern was pretty much a high school team last year. They were awful.
But they beat Nebraska and Ireland, though. They were undefeated.
They did that. But they couldn't beat Southern Illinois State, whoever it was out of the FCS, or Miami of Ohio, while Vandy was technically tied for last in the SEC, and they beat Florida and they beat Kentucky, and they won 3 out of conference games, and they finished 5-7.
Yeah, for sure. It's not even close.
No, you start to get to those like 7-8 spots in those seedings, and you start matching up like Mississippi State and Rutgers, and it's not pretty.
It was so funny with Vanderbilt because when they did beat Florida and Kentucky, obviously I was so happy for Vanderbilt. I was hoping they make a bowl game, to get, back to some resemblance of decency for the program. But I mean, getting those 2 wins was huge, but it was so funny because so many people online were saying that Texas A&M was worse than Vanderbilt. And I kept saying, no, Texas A&M is way better than Vanderbilt. The talent gap is large. And then the next week, Vanderbilt lost to Tennessee, like 65-7 or whatever. And I was like, there you go.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt's back.
Yeah, Texas A&M, for as bad as they were last year, they never got like blown off the field. They're not losing games. I think that game was 58-0. They're not losing 58-0 to anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, that was hilarious though. But yeah, I agree with you. The SEC is just from top to bottom is just more dominant than the rest, even though it is a great debate between the Big Ten and the SEC. But hopefully the Pac-12 can get things figured out. I mean, the Pac-12 and the Big 12 will never be able to match up with the Big Ten or the SEC ever again. But I do hope that they can find some semblance of being really solid, being, Power 5 teams. I don't want the Power 5 to go away, even though it is dead basically, where they're not actually equal at all. But I don't want them to be so bad where you can't even put them in the same league either.
Before we introduce Will here, I'll mention that unlike some of the other shows that we have here at the Voice of College Football, when somebody else hosts and they have and I fully approve of this, they can do whatever they want. If I turn over a show to someone and they like to do the big panel discussions, we typically don't do this when I host. I like to just have one-on-one conversations. I see Will pop in, and then I figure, look at the real MVP. This is like a dream lineup right here. We got the real MVP. We got Will. We got Jeffrey.
Hello, everybody.
Look at this.
Hey, Darrell.
Hello.
Something I said must have just kind of poked the bear, the real MVP. Maybe something I said about the SEC, although I did say it's the best conference in America, and it's not debatable.
No, I just wanted to come on, and Jeffrey, man, you as a Big Ten fan, I'm glad you're able to see reality as the way it is, my friend. A lot of Big Ten fans don't want to accept the reality that the SEC should be considered the best conference by far. By far. Yeah, I know, Mark. I have little issue with Mark saying Ohio State and Michigan won that it would be close. No, it wouldn't, Mark. I'm sorry. It just wouldn't. It just wouldn't be close.
Darrell, many times you get on here and your first point spot on, and then you just, you lose it after that. You're telling me I did make this statement, Darrell. Now, believe me, you know this, that had Ohio State and Michigan played in the national championship game, there'd be a ton of Big Ten fans out there, and rightfully so. They would be justified, even though they may not be right, they would be justified to say, you know what, that's enough to say we're the best conference. If we've got two teams in the national championship game, plus they could say Penn State just won the Rose Bowl, that we're the best conference. And I wouldn't argue with them. I would say, if you size them up 1 through 14, I still think the SEC is better. I would have the debate with them, but I wouldn't say they're unreasonable. There's a difference to me between, sometimes I have people on here and I say, that's a good argument. I don't agree with you, but you're logical. That makes sense. I understand your point. And then there's a difference between some people come on here and I say, you don't know what you're talking about. That makes no sense. So the Big Ten fans, Darrell, would have a justified argument. Had that happened, it of course did not.
Well, they would have some sort of argument. Justified is a bit of a strong word. Justify implies there's some correctness about the argument.
If they had two teams in the national championship game and one of them beat the SEC defending national champion.
Cool.
I think still losing by one was impressive.
The other one beat TCU. Woohoo.
They won a playoff game. Had they won,
that says a lot more about Michigan to me than it does about TCU. Who'd Michigan beat out a non-conference schedule that was a powerhouse?
Yeah, the UConn, Hawaii, and the other Colorado State wasn't impressive. That was not impressive at all. They need to do a little better.
Listen, we got to take it as face value. Out of every Michigan non-conference game, TCU was by far their best one, and they lost.
Yes, if we want to take it back to reality and what actually happened, sure.
And that's where we should be based in, is reality and what happened. We shouldn't deal with hypothetical speculation.
That's
and all
what
that
you
stuff.
Started with.
Well, yeah, I brought it up because of you, Mark. You were talking about if Ohio State beat Georgia and the kick went in, and if Michigan decided to actually run proper plays. then they would be in the national championship
I
game.
think Michigan, if they had played proper defense, would have been in the national championship game. That's the problem, because they defended against the Buckeyes a lot better than they did against the Horned Frogs. That was their issue. They gave up way too many points.
That's true. They also, I think, got too cute along the goal line.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that costed them as well. But, Mark, I mean, just go through the list of teams the SEC has beaten. And even add TCU and Georgia and go through the teams the Big Ten has beaten. You'll see one side is heavily favored.
Are you trying to convince me of something that that I know?
We all do. With SEC is the best conference. And I mean, to be fair to real, I like the Big Ten a lot, but I do like the SEC as well. I just usually come on here and talk about the Big Ten a bit more, but I like both conferences. I like actually all Power 5 conferences. That's why I come on and talk about the Pac-12 and all of them. I mean, I completely agree with you, Darrell. You're right. The SEC is by far the best. I just think that a lot of the other conferences get a little frustrating when it potentially gets shoved down their throats that the SEC is the best. And the ad that they do with it just means more. Maybe that's why they, fight back on it as much as they do.
Well, I agree with you that there is some frustration. I mean, I would hate it too if I was a fan of a conference or a team in a conference. I know Will and D's frustrated about this conversation since he doesn't know what a conference is since he's a Notre Dame fan. But as an SEC fan, it's frustrating that I saw a stat that like out of the last 17 national championship games, there's been 19 SEC teams. Think about that. There's been more SEC teams than there has been years played in the national championship game. That's crazy.
Because they've played in every national championship game and they played each other twice.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it just speaks to how dominant the SEC is. I don't think it's been thoroughly developed how dominant it is. It's not like there's even, to me, a debate. It's just so clear that the SEC is way up here.
Okay.
This is why we need to go back to the way college football was in the 90s.
SEC didn't do that good in other bowl games, though. Like, they did lose a lot of other ones.
The real, and then we'll attack Will's point here. I just want to get a clear picture of this because we all have our different terminology, and I'm somewhere in the middle. I do not believe that the SEC is just dominant over everyone, and it's just this enormous gulf. But I also don't think it's like close, super close. So where would you put this on a scale of 1 to 100, 1 to 10? If the SEC is at 100, then where is the next conference?
I would put the Big Ten this year,
Yes,
at a 75.
Okay.
And then I would put the ACC around a 60. And then, I mean, do I have to do the other two conferences?
I mean, they're probably ACC is better than the other two conferences because I don't.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry. This year, I forgot Clemson wasn't that good this year. I'll put the Big Ten at a 75. I'll put the Big 12 at a 70. I'll put the Pac-12 at a 65 and the ACC at a 60.
Oh, they're all bunched up.
Yeah, I mean, if a person said, "Hey, I think the Pac-12 is the second best conference," I would have less of an argument with that or a problem with that than somebody saying the Big Ten is better than the
wait
SEC.
a minute. The Pac-12's been, again, no offense to Tony, Tim, or any other Pac-12 man, the Pac-12's been bad for like 5 or 6 years before this past season. It was good this past season.
But I agree with that.
Awful.
I agree with that, but I'm just talking about this year. So any data in the previous years should not matter. Okay, listen. The Pac-12
well, if that's the case, then how come we're using the SEC as dominant by talking about the last, 19 or 20 champions and they're all in it? So that's kind of, going against what you're talking about.
Well, you can look at what Florida did to Utah. You can look at what South Carolina did to Tennessee. You can look or what they did to Clemson, what Tennessee also did to Clemson. Alabama did to Kansas State. I mean, it's just not 1 year. This year, it's clear that the SEC was way ahead of every other conference.
Again, way ahead.
Not way ahead when Mizzou's losing to Wake.
They won the national championship, and they had a really good list of non-conference wins in the regular season. But to Will's point, the bowl record, was marginal. I think they went 7-5.
Right,
Like,
but you also got to consider that the SEC is usually playing lower down because they you have
But
to
if
go
you say,
play up.
as you say, like if the SEC is dominant, like you're saying they are, then they should be going like at least only like 13-2 in the bowl games.
Yeah. And I'm going to jump off of my neutral platform for just a quick second and say Ohio State should have beat Georgia, so it should have been 6-6. Okay, I'm back to being Mr. Neutral. Okay.
Well, I mean that's not even not Mr. Neutral. It's an accurate statement. Everyone watched that game, and yes, Ohio State should have won if Marvin Harrison doesn't get hurt in the field goal and all that. I mean, that's accurate. It was a great game, and Georgia won, but it definitely could have gone the other way.
Only hey Jeffrey, does people get injured in games? Does that ever happen before?
No, that's why Alabama fans said that if Mechie didn't get hurt and in that year and Waddle didn't get hurt, then Alabama would have won it all against Georgia. So I mean, yeah, everyone's going to use injuries as an example. I mean, you look at the way Ohio State was doing pre Marvin Harrison injury to after, it's pretty clear that Ohio State was going to win that game. You are absolutely right, but what if the roles were reversed? Georgia was winning, and then Georgia had a player go down that was vitally important, like Stetson Bennett. Just say he got hurt, and then they fall apart. Ohio State wins. Then I mean, you would do the same thing.
I don't think you would see the same thing. I believe that. That's right. But I believe injuries shouldn't be equated for games.
Let's put it this way, Darrell. Georgia won the game fair and square, even though there would be some folks that would say the Marvin Harrison play was a bit iffy. I'm not even going to go there. They won the game fair and square. But what we are doing here is we're evaluating play, performance, not just saying, well, they won and they lost, because 42-41 is much different than 52-3. So Ohio State showed on that night that they could play right with Georgia and outplay them for most of the game. Correct?
You're right.
Okay.
But you also need to take into account who actually won the game. That's
Absolutely.
the most important single piece of data is who won the game. And that cannot be lost in the conversation.
But we're evaluating the conferences. Therefore, the performance and the manner in which the game was won is huge.
It is, but the result also matters significantly.
It's kind of like to Mark's point when he kept talking about like a game like Purdue-Syracuse last year, how Purdue should have won that game, but stuff happened at the end. You can't help that stuff happens, and then Syracuse wins. And then people were telling Mark and me and everyone else that talks football that Syracuse was going to go 9-3, 10-2 at the end of the year because they beat Purdue. They won a couple of games that were pretty good wins, but they barely won those games. And then what happened to Syracuse? They tanked at the end of the year because they actually weren't very good. They did have an injury to Garrett Schrader. Again, injuries don't matter according to you, but Syracuse just completely fell apart and wasn't good. But they really shouldn't have beat Purdue. They shouldn't have beat Virginia. I mean, it's just the way it is. Sometimes injuries make a difference. Sometimes plays that the refs do make a difference, and there's not much you can do about it. So you're right, but you still have to take those things into account instead of blindly just saying who won or lost.
I couldn't leave Tim out. If I was just letting in, the floodgates are opened now. So,
hello, Tim.
I'm not even sure how I want to respond to this one, but for real, it's usually maybe it's the messenger. If you were coming from like Alabama, or if you were coming from Georgia or LSU and talking mad smack on it, it's just hard hearing it from Kentucky. I gotta be honest. No one is debating that the SEC has won all the championships, right? Clemson jumped in for a couple here. Ohio State jumped in for one. We get it. But we're talking like 2 or 3 teams here, really. We're talking about, championship-wise being dominant. You're talking about LSU, Georgia, and Alabama. That's like 3 out of 14 teams, man. And you guys were a field goal away, granted, ifs and buts, right? But it's not like Georgia kicked the crud out of Ohio State. Wouldn't you say that was a pretty close game?
I already agreed to that with Mark.
Okay,
yes, it was close.
So you got to stop just short of saying that it's not, and it's not even close. Say the SEC is the best conference. Everyone goes, "Yep, you're right. We agree. You nailed it,
100%."
But you can't throw in there by a mile, by a huge margin, because then you just sound silly.
Well, you could think I sound silly, and that's your opinion, and that's your right to do that, but that's just what I think. I mean, you were saying only 3 SEC teams. What other conference recently has had 3 teams win the national championship from that conference?
And that's why we're all saying that the SEC is the best conference. But having the best team, like for instance, all those years when USC was, really dominant, did that make the Pac-12 the best conference?
No, you can't just have one team be dominant. It's depth matters.
So how many need? You need 3?
I think more depth than that. It's not just being talented at the top and winning the national championship that matters. Right. Every game matters.
LSU was far from dominant this year.
Right. I think.
Well, LSU's kind of, oh God, it's going to hurt me to say. LSU, when they're good, is really good. And when they're
bad, they lose to Texas A&M by 2 scores. Right?
And it sounds like a team that I like. They're really good and they can be really bad. They're up and then they're down. They're up and then they're down. I mean, it's still, they've won 3 national championships recently, right? In recent years, right? So, I mean, that's why I say LSU, but it's just the level that you take it to. I get it. I'm not sure if this is a bit you're doing or whatever. I'm not sure, but it's twofold. One, it's dude, you're from Kentucky, and 2, it's a bit extreme. Like I think that if you're talking a couple of years ago, you probably had a pretty good point, but across the board, the Big Ten just getting better. Period. Ohio State really came on strong and put a good team out there this year that went toe to toe with the best team in the country. So I mean, you can't say things like by a huge margin or by a lot. You can't. It gets ridiculous.
I agree with you. Ohio State was a great team. I agree with you. Michigan was a great team. Penn State was a really solid team.
Yeah.
It's just after those 3, I just don't know how good the Big Ten was. I mean, the Big
USC did pretty good. They're Big Ten now. Okay, sorry, Connor, wherever you are. All right, they're still in the Pac-12. But,
once you all join the Big Ten, I mean, the Big Ten's going to be a serious. They're going to be serious. The only problem is if Texas and Oklahoma join at the same time. So
there's Connor's statement right there.
Did you get me?
He's right. Every game should matter, and that 30-3 butt whooping that Florida took should be a count.
Opt-outs were a part of that, though.
No, hey, listen, Jeffrey, I'm reminded constantly Kentucky lost to Iowa 21-0. It doesn't matter that a potential top 10 pick wasn't playing that game, okay?
Yeah, I mean, I do take that into account because I picked Kentucky to win that game when I did, my picks for the bowl games, and Kentucky lost because I didn't know that the backup was that bad. You can't tell how, the backups are going to be. You just have no idea. I did pick Oregon State to beat Florida because of the opt-outs, and I felt Oregon State had, their stars they were going to win. But the bowl games are impossible now. You just have no
Florida
idea
wasn't winning that game. They quit. That team quit.
And let's be honest, Oregon State's a really good football team. We can't take away from Oregon State.
I was on my chair. Hold on. Can you repeat that? Because someone clip that. What's the timestamp on that? Okay, say it again.
Oregon State is a really good team. They were 10-3 last year. They were a top 15 team.
I
don't see how that can be argued that they weren't a really good football team.
Mm-hmm.
I consider that pretty good.
Better quarterback play, they could have beat USC earlier, in the year last year. No offense to them, but their quarterback play was bad early on in the season.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they basically beat Oregon without any quarterback play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that offensive line. They got a nice offensive line. Yeah, and so if we're gonna not count, so we're saying opt-outs. The reason why Florida had trouble and our teams had trouble. Are we going to say because Marvin Harrison didn't play a second half that's also probably a big factor too?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. You got to take these things into account.
I heard you guys talking. Yeah,
so you got to take this into account.
It is what it is.
One of the best players in the country.
Whoever suits up. Whoever's out there is out there. If injuries and opt-outs are now, unfortunately, a part of football. That's your team. Mm-hmm. Your team your players opted out, and that's an issue with your team. That's just the way it goes. So.
Mm-hmm. That's why Alabama beat Kansas State like they did, because Bryce Young played. Will Anderson played. If they had opted out as well, Kansas State could have won potentially.
Yeah, but everybody should give Bama credit. They had a good enough culture and a good enough coaching staff to convince those players to play.
Besides all the money exchange, the reason why the SEC was so damn dominant is because of the fact they had great coaches. They had like really a great group of coaches, right? But now you're seeing in the Big Ten, you're seeing some changes. And in my view, of some of the also, you guys lost a great coach in Leach last year, and you're looking at Fickle joining the Big Ten, Rule joined the Big Ten, Riley joined the Big Ten, and then you have obviously
your boy Chip.
I mean, Chip's a wild card. You know what I mean? I don't want to ever say anything nice about that, but I mean, the guy does coach offense pretty damn good. If that guy ever learns recruit, Mark, if they somehow get something going in recruiting, UCLA can be a very strong program.
I'm waiting for it. They have always been the biggest X factor wild card mystery school to me as a football program.
Yeah, I think it's the shadow of the basketball program that did a lot of that for a long time.
Hey, I can relate to that. As a Kentucky fan, I know how that feels.
Yeah, Indiana as well, but Indiana football is really bad.
Now, Daryl, I have to ask you, how confident are you that you'll be Vandy this year?
90%.
Devin Lear will get it done as long as he's healthy.
I don't know, man. I mean, doesn't Vandy have a lot coming back?
Vandy,
I mean, but Kentucky, let's be honest, Kentucky's just more talented than Vandy.
The Vandy running back that ran for like 140 yards for Vandy, he transferred to Kentucky.
Yeah, we took Northern Illinois, one of their really good players. Basically, what we did for the transfer portal is we played teams and then we took their best players or one of their best players. That was our model.
Check the phone records. I think being poached. I want to look into that. I think that might.
Well, I definitely think Vandy can be Florida again. I mean, Florida's a dumpster fire right now.
I mean, it's possible Florida can go 3-9.
I think Florida's going to miss Dan Mullen a little bit until they get their next great head coach potentially, or they get it figured out, and then they won't.
Yeah, I mean, I know Uncle Lou talks about it a lot, but Florida is becoming the new Tennessee, where they're just constantly in purgatory.
I still can't believe they couldn't get anyone better than Graham Mertz, man. Like I
couldn't believe he transferred there. I still can't believe it.
I mean, I saw him play against my Irish, man. He was rough. I think
he had like
3
touchdowns and 11
4
picks.
picks total.
Speaking of rough, hey Will, before I can't let you off, what's up with your offensive coordinator being your tight ends coach last year? Tell me about this. Tell me about that really quick before you go.
Tim, man,
I've seen a while since
that was a low moment. That was a low moment, Tim. No.
Man,
I mean,
Will, can I ask you, is it 9-3, 8-4 on the table? Have you seen the over/under? Your over/under is 8.5. 8.5 for second-year Marcus Freeman. Who do you think that fourth game they lose to would be, Duke or Louisville?
We're not losing more than 3. I mean, the reason that it's that low is because of the disasters against Stanford and Marshall.
Hey, I mean, Notre Dame, they got a huge win over South Carolina.
I'm still holding out hope for 11-1.
How many offensive linemen do you return, Will?
O-line's going to be nasty. I think besides Patterson, I think everyone else is coming back. I mean, all the important pieces are anyways. So O-line's going to be good. Quarterback's going to be good. This might be the best Notre Dame offense since 2015. They just need to get the play calling right. Like as long as the play calling's good, I think we'll be good on. But defense scares me a bit because I'm worried about the defensive line and the linebackers. But I feel like the Irish are going to have a great team, and I think we'll be able to compete for. I don't know. I'm not saying we'll beat Ohio State, but I think it'll be a close game in the fourth quarter this year because I think our offense will be competent. The USC game, honestly, USC's offense scares the crap out of me because we saw what happened last year.
It's going to come down to the Notre Dame defense. Can they slow down USC's offense enough? And then obviously USC's got a defense that needs a lot of work.
I'm going to be at that game.
And then Notre Dame's going to have to find a way to.
My throat's going to be so sore.
No, you're going to be there?
Oh yeah.
Right. Okay. I'm going for sure then. All right. I'm going to go meet Will.
Yes. Let's go.
Yeah.
I gotta ask you, Tim, right, real quick. I mean, do you think that Lincoln Riley will ever get a good defense?
Yes. So I think that,
Really?
yeah. I mean, look, I'm just gonna put it out there. It can't get any worse, right? And so here's the issue. By good, I'm saying I think USC is gonna have a top 30 defense pretty soon. Yeah, I think probably top 50 this year, and a top 50 defense, you guys, is gonna win the Pac-12. Top 50 defense might get us into the playoffs. Is it gonna win? No. But if it's better than I think it's going to be, we could get interesting. I think by the time we get to the Big Ten, I think it's going to be drastically improved. Yeah, I mean, you realize everyone's looking at. There's a lot of football knowledge right now in this panel, and I respect every one of your guys' opinions. Lincoln Riley, how much time did he have to recruit the guys he played with last year? Like no time at all. This is his first recruiting class. This is his first full portal thing. If they roll out there and Grinch lays an egg again, and they're giving up, they're like in the hundreds when yards per play against them.
Fingers crossed.
Then we start going, okay, that's kind of worrisome. But if you see him jump from like bottom of the barrel to top 50 defense, I cannot explain to you guys enough how bad our defensive personnel was 2 years ago. I just can't even put it into words. It was the worst defense, and I'm an old man, I've ever seen USC field. Not even close. So anybody thought that they were going to roll out, a new defensive scheme and play with, those players? They've replaced 66 players in 2 years as of this year. So now it's kind of put up or shut up. You've had a whole year to get your guys in there. Transfer portal does accelerate things. If he's still somewhere in the 80s, 90s, and 100s, I think he's gone. So my thing is will he have a good defense? My answer for that is yes, is because either Grinch gets it together or we're getting a new DC. So yes, he will have a good defense.
Tim, are you at all worried? Like, do you think that how good your offense is, that your defenses keep getting put on the field a lot? Do you think that's part of the reason?
No, well, possibly, but the one thing we've had going right, even going back to the Helton era, is we started getting a really good offensive line. There's a guy named Clay McGuire, and he's now up at Washington State. Helton's last year was the first time he hired an offensive coordinator that actually was familiar, with the type of offense that they were trying to run, and that started it. And now they added a couple of guys. Tarquin came over from and White came over from Florida. They brought a guy down from Washington State. These are big dudes. And then we got the running back Lloyd from South Carolina. We are going to run the ball. Watch how much we run the ball this year. We're gonna start showing you guys. Riley's offense is not like just run and just run and shoot, just spray the ball all over the place kind of offense. It's not. It really isn't. And so you have to, you'll see. I guarantee it. The way they're talking, because the best defense is a good offense, period.
I think at this point, with LBC on the line now, we appreciate Rick joining us, and Jackson wants to get on the line. It's like time for you guys to just completely take over, and I'll jump off, and you guys can just go crazy.
Before you go, Mark,
where we are here.
Before you go, Mark, because I called in, I did call to say hi to these guys. I love these guys, but I called because I wanted to talk about you're going to be doing your all-time rankings.
Yes,
and I wanted you maybe to rethink one category. I think of all long time lists I've seen, I think yours is about as thorough and as good as anyone, if not the best. But one beef I have with you is I just don't think you give enough credence. I think you give too much credence to all-time wins and not enough to
winning percentage.
Okay, winning percentage. And you don't give enough credence to bowl percentage. Because here's my thing. Everyone plays this weird schedule and just a bunch of games, right? Matter of fact, some teams play a lot of FCS. Some teams don't play any FCS. Do you include the FCS games in your percentages?
Yes, it is impossible for me to run through the history of college football and extract all the FCS wins.
And I anticipated that answer.
Program.
But here's your answer. Are there any FCS guys in bowl games? No. And you're right. I think ESPN has watered it down quite a bit in recent years. But if you're like a top 10 team, top 5 team, you're not playing in a lot of those garbage bowls anyway. You're usually playing in some pretty good bowls, right? And the one thing I have is there are a couple people who are not going to be happy with me on this panel, but if you've got a losing record in bowl games, it's just hard for me to check up and say that you might be one of the best programs in history. That's my beef. You guys can disagree with me or not, but I think one criteria for being a top 5 team is you have a winning record in bowl games.
Curse you, Charlie Weiss.
Well, I'm not saying, Tim, that you don't have a good point there, because I think that's yes. I would change a number of my rankings slightly in a lot of things if I had the resources to say, okay, I want this factored out. If I could press a button and have certain things filtered out, but I can't. So yeah, I cannot take that out. I'm just going strictly by winning percentage. And you make a really good point, because yes, take any of the great programs during their heyday. Let's take Ohio State currently. You look every year, they're playing a top 3 or 4 team in the country. And you take Ole Miss has a lot of bowl wins. They're playing like unranked teams. They're playing, they're playing 6th and 7th place teams from other conferences. They just happen to win those bowl games, which is good for them, but they should not be given the same weight. That's why I did separate major bowl wins from bowl wins. But you do make a great point. The one thing I will say is, though, we'll take our friends at Michigan, for example, that's got like a 21-29, I believe, is their all-time bowl record, something in that range. Those are 50 games that are spread over 100+ years.
Well, their bowl record in the Rose, so I kind of broke it down. I looked at Rose Bowl. They're 8-12 in the Rose Bowl, and their winning percentage overall is happy 420. So it's like, I don't know. I understand you win a lot, but the problem is by the nature of what college football is you don't play the same schedules. You don't play the same teams. You don't play the same caliber, etc. And I think in the end, a lot of it does balance out a lot. It does, but it comes down to, who you play. Like, for instance, USC plays Notre Dame every single year for the past almost 100 years, give or take a couple of years, right? Everyone has a pretty good rivalry, but if you look at the totality of football, who's had a stronger rival than that over that time period? When you talk about national championships and just winning programs, it's
over what period of time?
Let's take yours. I think you take the bowl era, correct?
I went from 1936 because that was the first AP poll.
Yeah. So during that time frame,
Notre Dame's arguably the best during that time frame. I'd say the last 50 to 70 years, I'd take Michigan's rival as being the toughest rival that anyone would have had to face over the last 50 to 60 years.
Well, in the last 50 years, so what would that be? That'd be like 23.
72, 73.
So that means like Notre Dame is 1, 2, 3. Like, okay, yeah. I mean, I that's fair enough. Okay. I agree with that. But that's just one component. I know it's impossible to do, and I think I'm asking for something difficult. I wish, I know you can't take stuff out, but I wish you would weight that a little bit more, because seeing how what your percentage is against, because by definition you're talking about winning teams regardless of like where they are on that spectrum. And then really when you're talking about those big teams, you're talking Sugar Bowls, Rose Bowls, Cotton Bowls, right? You're talking about big time bowls in general. Someone like Alabama, for instance, it's clear how dominant they've been because their bowl record is like almost impeccable. It's probably the best out there.
Well, to your point, I would love to add categories to say what are schools' records against ranked opponents, top 10 opponents, top 5 opponents.
But what's the flaw in that, Mark?
Winning records, because I don't even love the rankings myself. Teams
right.
With winning records.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that for a number of years you're talking about conference champions you're playing. Your team is playing their conference champion in that game, and that's why I give it a lot of gravity. Is because of the fact that opponent is like a heavy hitter. Someone didn't say, oh, they're number 7 in the country. Oh, they're number 9. So therefore they're a number 9 team in the country, but therefore they're they're a top 10 team. So they're a big opponent. And do you get at the final rankings, or do you do at the time of the game? It's just, is all those numbers get a bit mixed
Well,
up.
the,
You know what I
the
mean?
final rankings are more relevant, but that's also another thing I encounter all the time that's difficult when I put together some of these lists is to go to the game and look at the rankings for the two teams when they play is a lot easier than like kind of trying to whittle through and figure out, oh, when like if I look at USC's schedule for 2003 when they won the national championship, to look at the rankings when they played the teams, they're all self-evident right there on the schedule versus going, oh, did they finish ranked? Then I got to go look them up and I got to look up
Right.
every
Or
team.
teams that weren't ranked end up being ranked. Yeah, no, I get
Exactly.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's a headache. It's a plea for me. Because I obviously have a bias in this but I think it's important. I mean, I'm really proud of USC's bowl record, you know, and
Absolutely.
and anybody looks at USC,
Phenomenal.
do yourself a favor, look at USC's Rose Bowl record. It's really good. So then to see them put behind teams that don't have the greatest bowl record, I go, I don't know. I just think a lot of empty calories. I think a lot of wins in your regular season can be a lot of empty calories. And also I'm proud of the fact that USC has never played an FCS team ever. Like they're the only team ever to do that.
Clay
Notre Dame
Helton
just
and
recent-
Lincoln Riley haven't necessarily helped your bowl record, but all time it's phenomenal. And in the Rose Bowl, like I think that is one statistic that should be highlighted by USC fans, and I know you and Rick do, and I think it's justifiable to say our Rose Bowl, we are playing the best team in the Big Ten, except for odd years when teams like Illinois make it in 2007 and they're like a third or fourth place team in the Big Ten. But that's a
and that's why we beat them like a drum.
aberration. That's an aberration. But to have what's the all-time USC like 25-8 or something like that?
25-9.
25-9 in the Rose Bowl. That's
Well, the next most wins is 9 by Ohio State. We have 25.
exactly. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah. So our overall record is not that strong. And like we've had this discussion before, USC has a really high ceiling, but they also have this very low floor that they decide to go to every decade or two. And so
low for an elite program. It's
right.
not low.
But by top 10 standards, yeah.
Even Clay Helton's record, 85% of America would have liked to have had his winning percentage at USC.
Well, there's a good chance that our worst coach of all time won a Rose Bowl. So there you go. You know, there's a lot of programs that haven't even won a Rose Bowl. So yeah. All right, that was my little.
Can I talk about
hopefully,
we're going to bring Rick in here, and Rick, give me just 2 seconds because I want to.
Got it.
I want to recognize our first All Access Hall of Famer YouTube member, Shoelace Sooner. Thank you so much for that. And also, I have posted our YouTube members that have joined. We got 20 members right now as YouTube members. So thank you so much for being members here at the Voice of College Football. And I would encourage everyone, not necessarily to be a YouTube member, but at least check it out and see what the benefits are and give it a look. I am going to make myself dinner, and I'll allow you guys just to go to town, and we'll bring Jackson in here as well.
Oh, what's up, gents? How's it going?
What's up, Jackson?
Not much. Just spreading the joy of the Easter Beagle on account of Easter being 3 days from now. Yep. So is Darrell on here?
Well, hold on a second, Jackson. Didn't you have Rick? You want to make a point about defense, right?
Yeah. Is Darrell still on here?
Yeah.
I'm here.
We're all here.
Okay.
I'm still here.
So
I've been listening to Tim's rant for 10 minutes about bowl winning percentage.
It's appropriate that the reel's in the middle because everyone's just going to like.
Hey, hold on. I'm looking up Kentucky's bowl record. Go on, guys.
It's appropriate that he's going to
don't
be
look
there
up
because,
any all-time
we
stats.
all know
Hang on.
the SEC plays the best defense. Darrell, can you agree with me on that the best defense is played in the SEC?
Yes.
Can we get an agreement? Okay, good. And we know USC has a horrible defense last year, correct?
Yes.
Can you agree with me on that? Okay. So if I take a look at your best team in the SEC, Georgia, and I look at 5 years, I'm going to take last year out there. Obviously 15-0, they didn't lose again. But 2017 to 2021, I believe that's 5 years. They lost 10 games. 6 of those losses, they gave up a total of 239 points, which is 39.8 points a game. Now, if I didn't reveal the team and if I just told you that, hey, a random team lost 10 games in 5 years, but 6 of those losses were by a total of 239 points for 39.8 points a game, most people would laugh at that type of defense. But that is Georgia in the best conference, the best team in America under Kirby Smart. So I know the SC is for real, but Daryl, how do you give up 239 points in 6 of your 10 losses? How?
Well, you play teams with amazing offenses with generational quarterbacks. And there's only one way, really,
Okay.
I've seen Georgia get beat repeatedly, and that's just with teams.
You know what?
What were you saying?
Well, I was just going to say, is it good defense or now it's great offense? Because for the longest time in the Pac-10 and the Pac-12, we've been ahead of the curve with generational quarterbacks, but we've had to hear for several years that you just don't play good defense out there. And we try to tell you boys back then that, no, we've got great quarterbacks when you guys were slugging out 9-6 with LSU and Alabama about 15 years ago. Now that you start getting California quarterbacks or quarterbacks from the West Coast, and you open up your offense and you come into the 21st century, now all of a sudden, when you look at the numbers, I mean, numbers are numbers. That's Georgia giving up 239 points and 6 losses. And now we're doing the back shuffle. If that was a Pac-12 school, come on, we would be getting disrespected.
The best comment you said, Rick, was the California quarterbacks.
Well, there you go.
I'll admit that was a good point he put up in there with the California quarterbacks.
It takes a little time. You guys are a little slow, but you're caught up. That's how we won those national championships in 2003 and 2004.
Right.
When we were told our conference doesn't play any defense. So
do you want me to take
You're
this,
right, but
Daryl?
the
Or
rules.
you got this? You got this, Daryl? You got it?
Mark wants to
Mark,
talk
if you
about
want to jump
facts.
in, jump in.
I can take this one up for you.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, it kind of all doesn't matter when you're winning the games.
Exactly. Thank you. Scoreboard doesn't matter. But the best team in the best conference in America on paper is giving up 40 points a game. I mean, come on. How do you give up 40 points a game in 6 of your losses? That is ridiculous.
You got a quote so good you just walk off.
Yep, there you go. Elvis left the building. Daryl, I love you, man.
I love you too, LBC.
I'm just asking you the question, dude.
Listen, but USC, I think.
All right, that's all I got.
No, you're fine. I think USC has a talented enough offense to beat Georgia. My issue is I have no faith in Alex Grinch on defense. If USC had a capable defense, just capable, I would seriously consider them a national championship threat. They would be in the same tier with me as Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State. But until they prove they can have a capable defense with Alex Grinch at the helm, I just don't see it.
In all seriousness, okay, so we're going to go here.
Hey, it took Kirby Smart a few years to build up that defense. Okay, Lincoln Riley's had 1 year.
Yes, but at Oklahoma, he has the same defensive coordinator.
Sure,
if
I get that. But at the same time, Daryl, USC is not Oklahoma. You can't compare the two.
Exactly.
I'm seeing direct parallels between the two paths. I'm seeing very similar things from what I saw at Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley, and I'm seeing with USC at Lincoln Riley. And I think a lot of people are going to compare those two things.
Don't compare Oklahoma and USC at all, because USC has a higher ceiling. Okay, and that's what a lot of people across the country don't realize or don't want to know or don't remember. But when USC is at its best, a la John McKay, Roberts,
breaking up, Rick.
Many programs in the country, including Oklahoma. It just is. So we
I
have
just
the
wanna-
ability to build a roster.
I agree with you there,
You
Rick,
know,
for sure.
to that
I'll
of the
kind of
SEC.
back
That of
up
the
the real
SEC.
just a hair. I think what he's saying is he's just comparing the two because they have the same coach, and he's going to believe they're going to do the same. I agree with you that USC has a higher ceiling, but Lincoln Riley will have to get, with Alex Grinch, a good defense, or without Alex Grinch, a good defense, or they're never going to be a national championship winning team. They weren't at Oklahoma because the defense was poor. I agree that USC can achieve that, but they're going to have to get a better defense or there's no chance.
There's a lot of reasons to go behind it. There's a lot of theories going behind it as well. But I will tell you one reason why Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma is not, and I repeat, not because he was scared of the SEC. That's a beautiful narrative, but anybody who knows coaches and their egos, they think they can do anything. Number one. Number two, the real story behind him leaving was the fact that he felt he was not being supported by the OU athletic department. He wanted more staff. Oklahoma wanted him to compete against Georgia and Alabama, but did not want to give him the support staff to do so. Did not want to give him the budget to do so. Did not want to give him the facilities to do so. And he kept saying, I want this, I want this. And they kept saying, no, and so he finally got tired of it. That's when he started looking around. That's when we started hearing the LSU rumors. And that's when USC swooped in and said, hey, what do you want? Here's a blank check. Come over here and we got it for you. And they've done that. They gave him the support he wants, the staff he wants, and everything. That's going to be the difference. If you look, you guys, I don't want to talk. We can sit here and say how bad his defense was in year one. But let's face it, in year one, most defenses suck. You get a new defensive coordinator rolling in. Couple that with the fact that USC went 4-8 the year before and had, I'm going to say it again, the worst defense in USC football history. And then in 1 year, you guys want him to turn that around. I think that's a big ask. Now, I said in 2 years, he's had a full recruiting class. He's had a full 12 months, 14 months to go ahead and into the portal and get the players he wants. He has done that. He's added size. He does have, I think they're probably maybe about two defensive tackles away to get some some cushion for injury and some depth. But this team is not a top 20 defense. It will not be a top 20 defense. It probably won't even be a top 30 defense, but it's probably going to be somewhere in the top 50 range. And if they're in the top 50 range, unless you're like a Georgia, OSU, Alabama type team, good luck beating USC with a top 50 defense, because it's going to be an uphill battle without a doubt. Look at Will. Will's already.
I agree with everything you just said, Tim. I agree with literally everything you said. I've just seen Alex Grinch too many times at Oklahoma not be able to do it. I understand he's at a different team. The recruiting base is different. They're getting good players. But until he can actually do it, I just don't believe it.
Fair enough. But I would caution you to say that he can't. See, if you want to say that you don't think he will, fair. He hasn't, fair. He can't. You're trying to push maybe a narrative too far that what was he, 3 years Oklahoma as a DC?
I think you're right. I haven't seen that he can do it, but I don't saying I can't is too strong. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
and I want to see it first before I'm a believer.
He was there for 3 years. And by the way, rest of the world, don't push USC to get our defensive core. Are you crazy? You probably want us to keep Grinch. You probably want him to just say high enough above the water, keep his chin above the water enough that we don't get a Jim Leonard, right? You don't want to see that. Riley and Leonard,
That's why people were happy that Clay Helton was getting by.
Want to see that happen. It's good.
That's why people were happy Clay Helton was getting by at 8-4 because he wasn't getting the job done.
Just be careful what you wish for. I'm just telling you. And the good news is for USC fans out there, maybe whoever you are, we're either going to have like, wow, oh shoot, we were wrong about Grinch, or come on down Jim Leonard, because I think that's what's probably going to, or something similar, because they're not going to throw $10 million at our head coach and not be willing to open the checkbook up for a defensive coordinator to give us a national championship. I think we all could agree to that.
Seriously, why does Jim Leonard not have a job? I don't get that.
Wisconsin should have either let him be the head coach or the DC.
Yeah, I mean that is anybody that needs a DC should totally get Jim Leonard.
He's probably waiting for the right job.
Well, I hope whoever gets
him. I got to roll. Good night.
Good night, Red.
Thanks for coming on, LBC. Enjoyed talking to you.
Hey.
Yeah.
Good talking to you, DeReal. Always.
Yeah, no problem. Good luck to his USC Trojans next year. Good luck to them.
Rick, I'll see you in a minute. Yeah, I think I'm gonna head out to you guys. Nice talk, as always. I think Mark's burning his pizza, I think, in the background.
Uh-oh.
I don't know what he's got going on over there, but appreciate the talk. Thank you, Darrell. Always fun.
Yeah, no problem, Tim.
We gotta talk
Happy
again
early-
soon.
happy
Tim.
early
We gotta
Easter,
talk again
Tim.
soon.
Yeah, we're gonna have our I think we're gonna have our breakdown of the schedule coming pretty soon. Definitely, I want to have you on. Obviously, we'll talk about Notre Dame, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I believe it's 142 days until kickoff. But then again, it's never too early to talk about college football. At least not for us guys.
There is no off season.
No,
Not anymore
no.
in any sport almost, especially college football and basketball.
3 more weeks is the NFL draft.
I just figured you guys were going to do like an all-nighter. So
No,
you
these
guys
guys will
take it
go.
home.
Rick and I were supposed to talk at 8:30. I said, hold on, I got to talk to Mark about the all-time list. And then I got sucked into this conversation. We were supposed to meet at 8:30 for our meeting, and that was like 50 minutes ago. So I'm going to head out. I will see all you guys later.
See you,
Happy
Tim.
early
Good talking to
Easter,
you.
Tim.
Yeah,
See
bye,
you,
guys.
Tim.
You guys close down whenever you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right.
Darrell, do you think this Kentucky team? Do you think this Devin Leary team has the potential to be better than the Will Levis?
I think, yes, if the offensive line can
Has
do
to be bad.
something
Cannot be
to
as bad
protect
as
the
last year.
quarterback.
Just can't be as bad as last year.
Listen, anytime I hear that, I think, what did Iowa's offense do last year?
Nothing.
I am so scared that, like, in week 3, Devin Leary's going to drop back and he's just going to get pounded and he's going to tear his ACL or a rib or something and be out for the rest of the season. I'm so worried about that because he's injury prone and the teams Kentucky's playing this year are really good football teams. Like Kentucky draws Alabama out of the West, so it's going to be a hard road for us to climb. But I think Kentucky, we're going to score a lot of points. We're not going to be able to run the football to save our life. And I think, unfortunately, halfway through the season or something, our quarterback gets injured.
Kentucky misses Benny Snell.
Yeah.
Oh man, he was one of the best running backs ever, man.
I remember he torched Penn State in that bowl game pretty bad.
Oh yeah.
No, that was Sean Clifford's first bowl game, I think, which is weird.
Oh
That he's
man,
been
the
playing
big
for that
blue
long.
navy line. Oh man, Clifford, the big blue navy line.
Yeah. Do you think
So-
the ceiling is 8-4?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I don't see any way on earth Kentucky beats Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and I think they'll lose to a Mississippi State type team.
That's what I was thinking too.
I mean, Kentucky and Mississippi State is weird. They never win on the road. If the game's at home, that team usually wins.
What about South Carolina, Louisville, and Missouri? Where do you see them? Where do you see Kentucky going against those three, Darrell?
Okay. South Carolina, I feel the most confident about. Missouri, it's my dark horse SEC team this year to go like 9-3. So I think they're going to be really good. I think this is Missouri's year to take their step up. And Louisville, they're just a complete wild card. I have no idea what to expect with them with Jeff Brom as their new head coach.
Do you think that if Mizzou has another 6-6 season, Eli Drinkwitz is done?
I would, but I'm not sure how much Missouri cares about football.
I think Missouri's starting to trend in the wrong direction because, I mean, Barry Odom got fired doing the same thing, and he was actually a little bit better than Eli Drinkwitz is right now. And I know there were other circumstances with Barry Odom that Will's told me about, but still, Eli Drinkwitz, his record is bad. And I think 6-6 might not be enough if Missouri does care about football. If they don't, they'll keep him.
Yeah, well, Barry Odom's total 4-year record at Missouri was 25-25. Eli Drinkwitz's current record at Missouri right now is 17-19.
Worse.
Who would you rather have as a head coach, Darrell? Lane Kiffin or Shane Beamer?
Kiffin.
Kiffin.
Why Kiffin?
I think he's a complete offensive genius. Whereas Shane Beamer, I think he's just a really good culture guy. He reminds me, he's a Sam Pittman, Mark Stoops type guy to me. but I think that has a ceiling.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, because Sam Pittman, I mean, the way that Arkansas was, trending up, they were like everybody's pick to potentially win the West, even almost, even though that was a long shot. But they were really disappointed. Kentucky's all over the place. Mark Stoops will have a good year going 9-4, and then they have what they had last year going like 6-6 ish. And then to your point, South Carolina, they have shown some promise, but it's probably not sustainable. So I would agree with the Lane Kiffin has the higher ceiling for sure, and that the culture guys they can't build sustained success. They can have good seasons. I would even argue in a weird way, Tom Allen's kind of a culture guy at IU in a weird way, even though they've been bad because they had a couple good years and it's down. This year they could be better. They've got some decent pieces, but it's not sustainable. They can't keep it good for years, years on years.
Well, yeah, in 2020, you all should have made the Big Ten championship game. You all really should have. That bothered me so much. They had a rule. You had to play X amount of games. Ohio State didn't play X amount of games. They should have not have been in the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, they bailed them out.
Yeah, they did that rule for a team like Indiana if they were 5-0. And they didn't make the rule all the way across the board. It was a bad move by the Big Ten. That whole season was handled badly by the Big Ten.
Right. But Jeffrey, and I'm pretty sure. I think we're both pretty sure if Indiana and Ohio State's role were reversed, they wouldn't do anything for them.
Yep, 100%. It's unfortunate. The brand power is huge, kind of like with the SEC. Ohio State's brand appeal, is way over Indiana in football. It's just the way it is.
Hey, let's ask Jackson some questions since he's on here. Jackson, do you think you'll be able to beat teams by more than one possession this year?
Now, you can ask me too. I'm technically an Alabama fan as well. So
I was wondering when you get around to that. I mean, tell you the truth, I'm a little bit nervous with some of the staff hires that Bama's made this year. Because, I mean, the fact that Notre Dame fans were happy to see Tommy Rees go is a bad sign, at least in my take.
I was really surprised they hired him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they couldn't get Ryan Grubb from Washington, right? I believe that's his name.
Yeah.
My question is, does this help the Pac-12 in a way? Because, he decides, nah, I'm not going to go to Alabama. I'm going to run it back with Michael Penix Jr. and try to win the Pac-12.
I actually think that's why he stayed. I really do, because the uncertainty at Alabama at the quarterback position, maybe he didn't like what he saw. He would have got paid a lot more, and who knows if that really was the reason. But like you said, too, running back with Michael Penix, because he's fantastic. I knew the guy was fantastic at Indiana, and they, no one really thought he was. But he was always getting hurt. But I knew if he got a chance, he could stay healthy, he would be fantastic, and that's what he's done for sure.
Okay, Jackson, that was a really great answer. I really enjoyed it. The only problem is you didn't answer my question, okay? Do you think Alabama is going to continue to play in one-possession games?
Yeah.
And do you think they're going to win all of them like they have been doing, or most of them?
I think they're going to win a lot of them, but I do think they'll definitely get revenge against Tennessee for sure. So, anytime you see a revenge game, Bama's always winning that one.
Do you think they're winning both, though? I don't know. I think they're going to lose one.
Well, the team I think will give Bama a hard time, and this is going to be a shocker, but it's going to be Texas A&M trying to give Bama a hard time. I mean, look at the last 2 years, right? Who's giving Bama a hard time?
Yeah, and the game's going to be at A&M. I think that Alabama, in my opinion, I think that they'll win the games that they beat, the teams they beat more, dominantly. They'll blow them out more. Not all of them, but some of them. They'll do better in that regard, but I still think they're going to lose a couple games as of right now. They're not unbeatable. I think they're going to lose a couple games, but they should do better against the worst opponents, unlike last season.
True. I mean, I still haven't really figured out who's going to be the West Division winner yet, but One
I mean, I
summer
think
goal.
it's probably Will's favorite coach of all time.
I'm
from what I
freaking
think.
worried about how good they're going to be this year. I really don't want them to win the West again.
I think
really
it's going to be LSU. I mean,
BK.
I'll be honest, Will. I think it could be worst
case.
case scenario. LSU could win the Natty this year.
You really, the real dude.
Come on, Florida State.
Okay, beating Alabama in regular season game is one thing, but do you really believe that BK can win the big game in the postseason? Because he's shown so far he can't do it.
Well, he did beat Bama last year. Now, I
Yeah,
don't know.
people talked about James Franklin not winning the big game either, and he did beat Utah. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
Can Brian Kelly do it? He did beat Bama to Drill's point, but he has
beat
struggled
Bama in the
in
regular
bowl games
season.
and stuff.
Yes.
He always
won a big
has
regular
a
season
stinker.
game.
He always has a stinker, and
Right.
I'm like, okay, is he going to have it? I'm like, okay, he did have it against A&M.
Like, he can win the big game in the regular season, but he can't win the big game in the postseason, like the SEC title game. He can't win a big game in the BCS Bowl. He can't win a big game in a New Year's Six Bowl. Do you really think he can lead LSU to the Natty?
Well, it's the question. See, I think the framing of your statement is wrong. I wouldn't put it 100% on Brian Kelly. I would put it on Notre Dame. I wonder if they just hit a recruiting talent wall that now at LSU they don't have.
I was also talking about his record from Cincinnati as well, because, like, again, not just at Notre Dame.
I mean, wouldn't that same argument apply?
Season, but he never won the big postseason game. Like 2008, he got Cincinnati win the Big East, but they didn't win the BCS Bowl against Virginia Tech in New Year's Day. So,
well, I feel like the thing that bothered me the most, Tariel, is not that we lost the games. It's that we got humiliated in like every game. Like, even though Notre Dame has less talent than those teams, like the games should at least be like at worst 2-score games, and they weren't.
Competitive, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that, Will, but I think you might just have to accept the reality of the situation that Notre Dame's just not going to be on that level and can't reach that level.
I mean, beating Purdue without a head coach 63-7 is not a big victory.
They won the SEC West in year one.
They beat
you all
by Texas A&M
on a 2-point conversion.
It's still, they beat Bama. It's not like every team in the country does that.
Yeah, but they looked sloppy against Arkansas without KJ Jefferson.
Oh, they should have lost that game. The way they played in that game made me feel they were going to lose to Texas A&M. Was I sure they were going to lose to Texas A&M? No, I still thought they would find a way to get it done. But they played awful against Arkansas. And a lot of people, were completely shocked. But a lot of people thought that LSU would win that game by a lot, because Arkansas didn't have KJ Jefferson. I think that people would have picked Arkansas more if KJ Jefferson was playing in that game. I think a lot of people were surprised by that result, but to everyone's point about Brian Kelly, his consistency as a head coach has not been there at Notre Dame or LSU so far. It's up and down. That's not a good sign when you're trying to build sustained success. You maybe can beat Alabama on a 2-point conversion play on your own field, but you can't beat A&M on the road that ended up 5-7. You barely beat Arkansas, who had their backup quarterback in. That's just not good.
Darrell, I don't know, man. Like, I understand that about the talent thing, but like Lou Holtz was able to win with less talent. Like,
but dude, that was like what, 40 years ago? I mean, that was way, way, way back in the day.
The players weren't trained as much as they are now. Right?
I mean, I'm sorry, but that was basically a completely different sport back then when they were playing.
They didn't throw as much. It wasn't 50-55 passes. It wasn't up tempo. It was all run the football most of the time.
I mean, Lou Holtz was able to get good guys with the academic restrictions, like great players with the academic restrictions. And I feel like Marcus is starting to do that now. I mean, yes, the talent may not look as good, but with the recruiting rankings, but trust me, we're getting guys at the skill positions we weren't getting with BK. So I definitely feel like we're going to be better once we get everyone in. It might not be this year, but
for sure.
I mean, Matthew Mayer or Michael Mayer. I mean, he he needed way better quarterback play. Michael Mayer did not get good quarterback play. The
We-
offense was not run right. He could have really been utilized because he was fantastic. I understand that the receiving core for Notre Dame wasn't really there. It wasn't like a top tier wide receiving core, but Michael Mayer was definitely underutilized.
We
And if
would
you
have went
had-
11-1 this last year if we would have had Sam Hartman.
Yes, I actually agree with that statement because there's no way they're losing to Marshall or Stanford with Sam Hartman. And Michael Mayer, the receivers and the running backs would have had a lot, because the running backs, the Notre Dame's running backs are actually solid. They can catch the ball in the backfield. I think that they'll still be able to utilize that this season. So I actually do agree with you there. I think they could have been 10-2, 11-1 for sure. And I feel bad for Michael Mayer because he didn't get utilized to the extent that he could have been. But it is what it is. Sometimes players don't get, to showcase their abilities. I mean, he's a great player. That's why he's going to be a first-round draft pick. But it's unfortunate to have a player like that doesn't get utilized in the way that he could have.
It also didn't help. He was the only option for offense that they had. I mean, when you run the same, basically, you know who it's going to. I felt like that really cost him in the Stanford and Marshall game.
Yeah, I mean, Jaden Thomas and Braden Lindsey both were both great receivers. They just weren't utilized well because Drew Pine wasn't great at quarterback.
Oh man, can't
Why he's
wait
going to
see that.
Arizona State, right?
Yeah, have fun, Drew. Have fun with the hot women at that school.
I can't
Anyway,
wait to see the
Jackson,
Blake.
do you know who your quarterback's going to be for Alabama?
I believe it's Jalen Milroe.
Okay, so you're telling me Alabama's probably going to go 8-4.
Yeah, Jalen Milroe is more than likely not going to be the starting quarterback.
I doubt
think it's
they're
going to
gonna
be
be
that
8-4.
5-star guy they got, or the 4-star quarterback that's behind him. I can't remember his name right now, but it's not going to be Milroe. If Milroe's the quarterback, he's gotten a lot better at passing. I can say that as a sports fan / slight Alabama fan. I'm an Alabama fan from ancestry, so I can tell you that Alabama is not going to go with Milroe unless he's gotten a lot better passing the football. I can tell you that.
Right. But
Because
right
to
now,
the real point, they will go 8-4 if Milroe hasn't gotten better at passing.
true. Right now, I'm kind of thinking it could be like an 11-1, 10-2. Right now, I'm not really sure, but when I get those preseason magazines over the summer, I'll know a little more on what's up.
Well, do you have anybody on defense that could somewhat replace what Will Anderson Jr. did?
Oof. That's a good question.
Will Anderson wasn't that good last year, though.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say that. Sometimes like team defense is better than one player. It's kind of like if Notre Dame's offense this year is better than last year, but they don't have a player that's going to get drafted as high as Michael Mayer. It doesn't matter. It's a team effort kind of deal. More players getting showcased. You're having more production from more players. Alabama's defense could be better if more players are good. Because, I mean, the corners for Alabama were bad. I thought Kool-Aid McKinstry vastly underperformed. You want to talk about Will Anderson underperforming. Kool-Aid McKinstry vastly underperformed. Jordan Battle underperformed. The safeties and corners were not good. That's why they got torched at times. I mean, they got torched by Jaden Daniels. That shouldn't happen. Jaden Daniels is not an elite quarterback. Solid. He's not elite. I think that overall Alabama's defense collectively has to improve. And if it does, then Will Anderson won't be missed that much because he was a great player, but he's one guy. He's not the whole defense. And to Will's point, he wasn't as good last year.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got Will about Notre Dame. I've talked to Jackson about Alabama. Jeffrey, what are you expecting for Indiana this year?
Well, I mean, I think that overall, looking at who they got, I mean, Taven Jackson, the younger brother of Trace Jackson Davis, he was a former 4-star recruit, freshman at Tennessee, didn't play much, transfers to Indiana. I think he has a lot of potential, and a lot of people are cautiously optimistic that he can perform right out of the gate, even though he hasn't had really any college experience. The other quarterbacks Indiana has are all young. Dexter Williams, who won the Michigan State game last year, he, has a messed up knee. It's not even a torn ACL. He completely jacked his knee up, unfortunately, so he won't be available at the start of the season. So it's probably going to be Taven Jackson. They got EJ Williams, a former 5-star wide receiver recruit from Clemson. He has a lot of promise. They got DeKeese Carter from Fordham at wide receivers. Those are solid receivers. The O-line's going to be key. They did get an offensive line coach from Wisconsin and Bob Bobstad. I think he's solid. I think he will definitely make the offensive line better because the offensive line is bad. And I think that if it's a competent offensive line, something into the nature of at least Indiana 2015-16, when they actually were drafting offensive linemen to the NFL under Kevin Wilson, I think that their defense is going to be in the middle of the Big Ten, probably like the 8th or 9th best defense. If they can get the 8th best defense and the 8th best offense, they can go 6-6. But their offense last year was last, or second to last, because Iowa was last. They were second to last, and the defense was like 10th. If they can get the 8th best defense and offense, which I think they can achieve, I think they can go 6-6. Early guess would be 5-7, but I think they can go 6-6.
Okay, Jeffrey, I've pulled up Indiana's schedule, and they've done something I doubt I would advise. They play a Big Ten opponent in week 1. They play Ohio State.
That's the Big Ten doing that. That's not Indiana. I wouldn't. I don't know why you would play the best team in the Big Ten in the first game of the season when you need to warm up. That's kind of like Utah playing Florida and then playing Eastern Utah or Washington or something next week. Something like that. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I remember the ACC doing something similar last year when Clemson had to play Georgia Tech, and I feel like you're just kind of stifling the growth of their potential team.
Yeah, it's not smart.
Right.
But I don't think they really care because it's Ohio State playing a team and it gets ratings week 1.
Yeah, I understand. But if it was a Friday game or a Sunday game or the Monday game, I would somewhat agree. But it's a Saturday game.
Yeah, it's not smart.
Like, with all the great games on that first weekend, make it a week 0 game if you want to do something like that. I mean, it would be the marquee week 0 game because the other one's Navy versus Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
So
wait, what's the Thursday night opening weekend games? Because that's what I thought.
Nebraska, Minnesota is one of them. I don't know if Utah, Florida is officially one, but it looks to be a Thursday night matchup. I know that Louisville, Georgia Tech, the Chick-fil-A kickoff will be on a Friday. So that.
To answer the chat, because everyone's talking about my fandom or whatever, I live in North Carolina. I'm a North Carolina fan. Alabama is my ancestry team because everybody in my family, I have some family members that were from there. So I liked Alabama first when I was a little kid. I still like them. I just don't come on here and talk about them that much because a lot of other people do. So my Alabama is my favorite team. But I live in North Carolina, so I like the Tar Heels. Indiana is my feel-bad team. I like Indiana because no one else does. They're bad. I just talk about them. Alabama is my favorite team. North Carolina in football. North Carolina is my home state, so I like the Tar Heels. And Indiana is my feel-bad team. There you go. So I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my mind. And I'm not a bandwagon fan. I've been watching Alabama since I was 3 years old. I've got Alabama hats all over the place. So that's a fact.
Okay.
I mean, I think Alabama's always been good. But
So I did what Jackson asked. I pulled up the schedule. I found something on SI.com, so credit to them. Week 0, Hawaii goes on the road to play Vanderbilt. I guess to complete that home-and-home series. Navy plays Notre Dame in Dublin. So you going to Ireland, Will?
I wish I had that kind of money, but I might just watch it live on Will ND and then do the Notre Dame postgame show on the Voice of College Football.
Great plug. And then San Jose State plays at USC. The Thursday night games is Florida plays Utah. Elon plays Wake Forest. Nebraska plays Minnesota.
Oh, the University of Musk.
Missouri State plays Kansas, and Kent State plays UCF.
Oh, man, Central Florida in their first game in the Big 12. Yeah, that'll be pretty fun.
Any thoughts about those games?
Kansas is going to spank Missouri State. Wait,
I have a friend that plays basketball from Missouri State.
Well, cool. I'm really curious about the first-year head coach of Arizona State. I'm curious to see what he can do.
Kenny Dillingham.
Yep.
Yeah, he's like 33 years old, 32, 33. Yep. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, he came from Oregon as an OC.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be pretty fun. Those
Back
Friday
to his alma
games,
mater.
that Friday game, the Battle of Miami, Ohio, Miami, Florida.
I mean, I'm gonna be intrigued just because of the Middle Tennessee game. Like, is it gonna happen again? Are they gonna?
Yeah, give me the Red Hawks. Aren't they the Red Hawks?
Yeah.
Yes.
Give me the Red Hawks.
That kind of looks like a trap game for the Canes.
You know, when I was younger, I always got confused between Miami, Ohio, and Miami, Florida. When I was a little kid, like 4 or 5 years old, I was getting so confused with it because you got Miami's in Miami, then you got Miami, Ohio, and Ohio. I'm like, what? It don't even make any sense. The Miami's Miami, Florida, but it's funny.
Oh yeah.
I would say one team's better, one team's worse, but not really recently anyway. Miami, Florida's capable of losing anybody.
Yeah, didn't Miami of Ohio do pretty good last year for their level of football?
I think
Yeah,
they made a
beat
bowl.
Northwestern, I think.
I wonder if Ohio State, Indiana, or if West Virginia, Penn State will be on CBS, or if one of those will be like the Fox game, so to speak.
Hopefully it's if Ohio State, Indiana's close, then I hope it's on national TV. If it's a blowout, then I hope it's on Big Ten Network
It's probably FS1
or FS1.
Well, because of like this is going to be the first year where CBS has that TV contract with the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
But this will be the only year where the Big Ten and the SEC kind of share CBS. So that's just kind of what I want. Wait a minute. Is Northwestern Rutgers going to be an NBC night game? Please tell me that's not the nighttime game for NBC.
I mean, some people would watch it, but it would not get the best ratings for sure.
I mean, it's nothing personal against Northwestern Rutgers, but it's, that feels more like a Big Ten Network or Fox Sports 1 game. But
Jackson, aren't you going to bring up the other Friday night game, Stanford at Hawaii?
Oh, Stanford! Yeah, that's gonna be really fun.
Yeah, if Stanford was back in their heyday, or like toward the end of their heyday when they were kind of starting to trend downward, when they still had Bryce Love at running back, and then they were playing Hawaii with Cole McDonald or something, that would be a great game.
Any chance at all for an upset in that game? Any chance, you think?
That looks like a toss-up.
Hawaii has gone downhill. They're nowhere near the program they were a few years ago, but Stanford is not great right now, and they just hired an FCS coach, and Troy Taylor from Sacramento State. We have no idea how he's going to perform in his first year. Stanford is really bad at this point, but I mean, I would lean Stanford, but I could easily see Hawaii winning that one.
Yeah, Hawaii is the same team that lost to Vandy by 60 at the beginning of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a blowout.
And then you got the Sunday night game. I assume it'll be a night game. You got LSU versus Florida State. Probably
fantastic game.
Yeah, most hyped non-conference
game last year.
Yeah, that's gonna be on that's gonna be the Sunday matchup.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be pretty fun. And the Labor Day game is going to be Clemson-Duke. I mean, it's probably going to be over within the second quarter.
Well, I mean, listen, Duke was a capable team last year.
I think it'll be a close game, at least going into the fourth quarter.
I think it could be a 34-20 type game Clemson wins.
Yeah, I could see that too, Drew. Yeah. I agree.
It wouldn't shock me if Duke was leading at halftime. Because, I mean, was all their games by one possession or less that they lost? They're like a Minnesota type team. They went really under the radar, but I'm really a believer in their head coach.
Yeah. So how long does Mike Elko stay at Duke before he gets a call? Is he going to wait for a better job, or is he going to stay right where he's at Duke?
He might stay. Well, he jumped Notre Dame as soon as he could to get the Texas A&M job for money. Right. But I don't know if he's going to be sign. Yeah. He also probably just didn't like Brian Kelly. I think that was part of it.
Joe Burke is saying, I'd like to see North Dakota State in the Pac-12 for football. That'd be pretty cool. I was thinking more like Mountain West, to be honest.
Yeah, there would be Mountain West because they don't have the academics to get into the Pac.
Like, think about it. Boise State, North Dakota State. You know,
That's
oh,
why
man.
Boise State doesn't fit in the Pac-12 because their academics aren't up to code. I mean, because they used to have an elite group of 5 football team. They're not what they used to be, but they're still really good. But yeah, the academics aren't there.
Oh, yeah.
Tony would definitely mention that because he's really good with the academic stuff.
10 more minutes, and it's 141 days to college football season.
Yeah, me and Will are already there. We're already at 141.
To me, about this big
I'm an hour behind.
rivalry
What's it
is
like in the future, gents?
this rivalry that's going on between the Pac-12 and Big 12 was something I didn't expect to see throughout the entire offseason.
It's so insufferable.
I mean, to me, I'm not sure if the Jackson or Jeffrey agree with me, but it kind of feels like 2 of the little kids arguing in the corner while the big boys are eating at the big kids' table. I mean, they're just arguing to figure out who's the biggest of the smallest kid. I mean, I don't see either of them being viable long term for a while. What do you think?
You know, that's a good question. I wonder if San Diego State, SMU possibly joining the Pac, helps in a way.
I mean, Tony was on here talking about the academics of it, and academics is very important for conference realignment. I would say it's the most significant piece, but I don't see. Listen, we're all football fans. We're all sports fans here. We need to understand that there's a reason they ain't putting spelling. There's not a world spelling bee competition for these colleges or anything like that. So I don't know how much it moves the needle on an actual TV deal.
That's a good point.
But it would be pretty fun to see a Texas team in the Pac. I mean,
again, it ruins the Pacific name. It ruins the Pacific name.
Yeah, I mean, I also think the Big Ten should change its name to the Big 16.
Yeah, I said that basically in chat. The Big 10 should be the Big 16. I mean, the names, I know it's the branding. You have the Big 10. It's been called that, the Big 12. But, like, for the last, 10 years, the Big 12 only having 10 teams and the Big 10 having 14 teams doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, so many people that I don't, that I talk to that don't really watch sports that much or don't really know like everything that's going on. I mean, they would even be like, why is the Big 12 have 10 teams? I'm like, well, they used to have 12 teams. Why does the Big 10 have 14 teams? Well, they used to have 10 teams. It's the branding, but it makes no sense because it is the Big 16 a year and a half or whatever. It is now it's the Big 12 again. But the conference names needed to be what they represented. The ACC was the Atlantic Coast Conference. All the teams needed to be on the Atlantic Coast. The Pacific, Pac-12, Pacific 12, Pacific Coast Conference, all that stuff back in the day needs to be Pacific teams. Adding Arizona State was okay when they did go to 10 teams, but they weren't on the Pacific Coast. That's why it was the Pac-8 or the Pacific Coast Conference because those teams were on literally the coast. Adding Arizona State didn't really make sense, and then adding Utah and Colorado blew it open because they're in the mountains. So that's why the Mountain West is the Mountain West because it's mostly the mountains. And then you have San Diego State, which is literally on the coastline. So some of it just doesn't make sense for the names. It's all about branding, which is fine. But when the branding doesn't represent what your actual conference is, then it just kind of messes up the names and makes them not very legitimate. But they don't really care much if the money matters more.
Yeah, I told you this earlier, but the state of Texas is going to have, if SMU joins, they'll have a Pac-12 team, a Big 12 team, and an SEC team. Within one state, you're going to have
two SEC teams, and let's see, one Pac-12 team, and 4 Big 12 teams. Like, wow.
I mean, that just shows you how little regionality matters.
Yeah, it doesn't anymore. I wish we could go back to the 90s the way the conferences were, but it won't happen. But it's crazy.
We kind of pretty much learned that regionality hasn't mattered since 2010, really. I mean, it's like, and somebody asked me this in like 2014, right? And somebody asked, did Missouri just suddenly decide they were part of the South? I'm like, no, they got sick and tired of dealing with Texas and Oklahoma. And West Virginia, well, they felt they were going to get more money from the Big 12 than they were from the Big East. So it's not a geographic decision. Nobody's sitting there going, "Oh, we don't geographically belong here."
I mean, I would, be a little more willing to accept that. I mean, I know it's money, but I'd be a little more willing to accept that if you didn't have the names that now are meaningless. That's the thing. And it doesn't matter. It's just a name. And again, it's about branding, but really none of the conferences even represent what their original name was anymore. None of them do. So it's just messed up.
Well, you're right that it doesn't represent the original names. My issue, I wouldn't really care about it, but with the guaranteed playoff system, the way it is, where each conference gets one playoff spot, I think you're going to have scenarios in the future where the 5th or 6th best Big 10 team could be quote unquote better than the best Big 12 team. And I think we just got to be honest with ourselves and say, is that a system we want going forward?
That's why when I talked to Mark about this, probably I think it was during the season last year, and I was just saying that it doesn't make sense how you have this system that they're wanting to put in place to allow every conference to be represented, but you're making these conferences unequal by taking the best teams out of these other conferences and shoving them into the Big Ten and the SEC for money. That's fine. But doing this system to allow all the conferences to be able to participate loses its validity, and it makes absolutely no sense when you're making it where these conferences are no longer as good as they used to be. The Pac-12 will not be on the Big 10 or SEC level. The Big 12 will no longer be on the Big 10 or SEC's level. The ACC, if they lose a couple more teams, will no longer be on their level. They're not really at their level right now. So you're wanting all these conferences to be represented, but now they don't deserve to be because they've lost the teams that made them legitimate conferences.
Right. If USC was still in the Pac-12 and they're as good as we think they're going to be going forward, I wouldn't have nearly as major an issue. Or Oklahoma was still in the Big 12. I just don't see how going forward they're even going to have a top 15 team usually.
Yeah, it's messed up. It doesn't make sense why you would choose to do that now when the conferences are as uneven as ever. It makes no sense.
And with the way the seeding is, let's take Will's team as an example, since his team likes to throw a wrench into everything for some reason. Notre Dame could be 12-0. Everybody agrees they're the number 1 team, but they'll be the 5 seed. And they'll have to play most likely they'll play the poor G5 team as their reward. They'll beat them and they'll probably have to play the Big 12 or Big Pac-12 champion. I just don't think that's a good system going forward.
I don't.
If Notre Dame's the best team, then they should get a bye. The best 4 teams, in my opinion, should get the byes.
Yeah, it should just
I
be
hate
the
the
best
buys,
12
man. I think
teams.
I'd rather it just be 16 or 8. But
it should be just the best 12 teams, from these conferences. And if you had the conferences being even, like the conferences were never even, but if they were like they were in the 90s, where every conference was pretty legitimate and all the conferences were on relative equal footing, then this system works. It doesn't work the way it is set up now with the way the Big Ten SEC are way more dominant. And I agree the buys are messed up. Because in March Madness, which I know no one cares about that here except a few people like basketball, you don't have buys. Everyone plays. Everyone gets an equal chance. Football's different because the teams aren't equal. You're not going to have Florida Atlantic in the Final Four. You're not going to have Florida Atlantic in the playoff advancing if they're the group of 5 representative. I get that, but it's still – this system should only have been if the conferences were like they were in the 90s, where the Pac-12 was good, the SEC was good, but it wasn't dominant like now. The Big Ten, all these conferences were relatively even. Then it would work. Then it would be justifiable. It's not justifiable anymore the way they're doing it, because the way the conferences are uneven. Like you said, there's going to be some years where the Pac-12 doesn't even have a top 15 team probably, and you're putting their champion in the playoff. Why? They don't belong if you're going off the 12 best teams. It should be the 12 best teams. That's why the conferences should have been the way they were before. But again, money is why they moved. It is what it is. It just doesn't make any sense why you would even do this system when you change the rules by allowing these teams to move around. And now you want to have all the conferences represented when they're not even. It just makes absolutely no sense. Either go back to the way the conferences used to be or don't do this system because it doesn't work.
And what I think you said about March Madness was a good point, because I'm not sure if everybody knows it, but every champion is in March Madness, except for teams with exceptions of transition rules and stuff like that. Yeah, I think you can do a similar thing in college football and say, hey, we're going to choose the conference champion, but they're going to be seeded based off where we think they're ranked. So if the
they're gonna be at the
Pac-12 or
bottom.
right, if the Big 12 they think is the 10th best team, put them in as the 10th best team. Don't put them at 4.
That's absolutely right. I agree with that.
Will, Jackson, what do you think about this rant/discussion me and Jeffrey are on?
Oh, man. Will, you want to go first?
Wait, so can I get a little? Sorry, I dozed off a bit. Can I get a summary?
We're just talking about the playoff and how you have it being uneven, and that these conferences shouldn't be represented where they're going to be at because it's uneven. Like Darrell said, if the Big 12 top team is the 10th best team, they should be ranked 10th, not 3rd or 4th, based on the seeding.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be fun if I like go on a run or something. But yeah, I mean, they probably shouldn't, but it is what it is. And I mean, I think maybe, I mean, hopefully this will get like more teams to put in money to their programs like Oregon is, so that these teams can be competitive. But yeah, like I mean, TCU probably wasn't the 3rd best team, but they're ranked 3rd. So we'll see if any of these teams can like beat a SEC or a Big Ten team. But
yeah, I think that NIL
definitely be
is
underdogs, even if they
like
are
you
playing
said.
at home.
NIL's the caveat, like you said, because like if Oregon gets good, then you have a legitimate argument there. But what if Oregon got poached somehow? And not that they would, because then you think about what if Oregon becomes like a top 5 team through NIL somehow, and they're winning all the time and they're going to the playoff, then they're going to be more viable to get picked. I'm not saying that the Big Ten or the SEC would, based on the fact, because I know it's a lot of other factors besides play, as Darrell said, and everyone said before, it's academics as well. But still, that's not likely that Oregon wound up being a top 5 team all the time. And again, to Darrell's point, the team should be seeded based on where they finish. If you're the 5th best team, you should be put in 5th seed. You should not be, ranked based on being a champion, because a champion doesn't matter if your conference is weak. That's why the group of 5 is always at the bottom when they put them in the bowls, because of the fact they're not as good. Unfortunately, as much as we love the group of 5, they're not ever going to be able to compete on the level of a Power 5 team. Cincinnati was the closest thing we've seen. And what happened to their coach? Left.
Chris Peterson, Boise State was probably the last one that could compete.
Yeah, I mean, they did, but that kind of start to Darrell's point, get into a different era as well. And he didn't leave. If Luke Fickell stayed at Cincinnati, he could have maybe built something there. Never maybe would have been on the level of Power 5 teams and on the resources, but he left because that when you do good at a team like that, it's your time to go. You make that jump so you can make more money and be able to have more success with more resources. So you're never going to have a group of 5 team have a lot of success. And now that the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are a lot weaker than they used to be, they're most years not going to have a team that's worthy of being the 3 or the 4 slot in the the playoff. It's just not going to happen. It's maybe some years, but it's not going to happen most years. You're not going to have a team in the Big 12 that's the 3rd best team. It's just not going to happen. They're going to be like 11th, but we're going to put them 4th because that's how the seeding works. It's just messed up, but it is what it is.
Okay, Jeffrey, I'm not sure if Mark's doing this in the I think Mark responded to us in the chat, said who determines best or 5th best or whatever. That's the flaw in the current discussion. So how would you respond to that type of notion that, well, it's kind of ambiguous of where each team is ranked, so we might as well all give them a shot? How would you?
I mean, the thing is like, I know that the argument is kind of like when we're comparing Big Ten SEC, and you can have a million arguments for why the Big Ten is almost on the footing of the SEC, not better than, but potentially closer than. Some people would think that the SEC is dominant. It's all superfluous because of the fact you can come up with a million different reasons for why something is what it is when it's not. Someone could say Texas A&M, it's 5-7, could beat Pittsburgh that's 9-3 in the ACC because A&M is more talent. Doesn't mean they will know they could go head to head and lose, but A&M on a good day is a better football team, even though they had a worse record. I think that's why they always say the eye test. You're basing off strength of schedule. You're basing it off of so many different things that it makes these teams more justifiable to be ranked where they are. That's why so many people are saying Alabama should have been in the playoffs instead of TCU, because Alabama's a better football team. Alabama's a better football team than TCU, but TCU won the games. They only one loss. Alabama had two, so Alabama missed the playoff. TCU got in. And Ohio State only had one loss as well. But you can make an argument Alabama was definitely better than TCU, and on a good day, Alabama might have been better than Ohio State on a good day. It's all, superfluous, because you can't really compare these teams in a vacuum, because when they play, the results aren't always the same. But I do think that you can tell who's better. And in you being an SEC fanatic, you would argue that the fourth best SEC team is better than the best Big 12 team in a given year. They should be ranked higher in the playoff than that Big 12 champion, because the fourth best SEC team is better that year.
Yeah, I think with that. Jeffrey, do you know who the fourth best SEC team was by the standings this year?
LSU.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a team called Alabama. You may have heard of them.
Yeah.
And the logic is Georgia beat Tennessee. Tennessee beat LSU. LSU beat Bama.
Yeah, I mean, SEC definitely has a good best four teams.
Well, that argument doesn't work.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Will. Sorry, I'll say it in a minute.
I mean, I don't know. I felt like SEC definitely had four great teams, but then I felt like the rest of them were at that Big 12 level.
Right, but Will, in a 12-team playoff, most likely only 4 are getting in at a max. So 5 through 14 really doesn't matter in the discussion. I mean, how many years do you think the 5th best SEC team's getting in? I don't think that'll ever happen, because 6 of the spots are already taken.
That's a good point.
And then Michigan or Ohio State's probably getting in. And then if you just need one other team, be it a Florida State, a Utah, an Oregon, something like that, being better than the 5th best SEC team.
I think to your point, though, Darrell, when you were saying that the 4th best team, Alabama was not the 4th best team in the SEC this year. I still think they were the 2nd best team.
Yeah, okay. Based on the results on the field, they were the 4th best team.
Yeah, I know. The reason why the head-to-head stuff doesn't matter to me is because of the fact you could have a team, that beat a team, that beat a team, that beat a team, that beat a team, and you go all the way down the list, and someone could say, well, this team's the national champion because this team beat a team that beat the team that won it all.
I get you with. I don't like transitive property and stuff, but if you look at the standings as well, they're 4th in the standings, but I think they're tied for 3rd. But since the team ahead of them they lost to, I consider them 4th. So I
agree. I mean, you're right. It's just that you look at chat, everyone's saying Alabama should have been in. I mean, I'm glad TCU got in. I really am. Yeah. I was glad to see the Horned Frogs in the playoff, but there's no way that Alabama was a worse team than TCU. That's just not a fact. And I think that Alabama is better than Tennessee and LSU. I mean, the talent's definitely better. They didn't beat either team, but sometimes it doesn't matter. I mean, the thing is that Alabama fans' argument, and me being an Alabama fan kind of, makes this that I'm being biased, but I'm not being biased. I'm telling what an actual Alabama fanatic that is biased that would come on here and use their argument. They lost by 3 to Tennessee, and they lost by 1 to LSU. So you look at Ohio State, they lost by a lot to Michigan. Does that make Alabama worse than Ohio State because they had the 2 losses? You can make an argument Alabama was better because they barely lost to the 2 teams that they lost to, and they were both on the road.
I understand what you're saying, Jeffrey, but results got to matter. Results ultimately have to matter, and they lost both those games, and that's unfortunate for them. But let me ask you a scenario. Let's say they're the 9th seed. Or no, we'll put them as the 10th seed. They're the 10th seed, okay? They beat USC in round 1, and they beat Michigan, and then they beat Ohio State to make the national championship game. Would you call Alabama a Cinderella in that scenario?
I don't really think Alabama's a Cinderella in any scenario until they become a bad team and then they, get good again and have a good season. And that's how you're a Cinderella. Alabama's not a Cinderella because they're a perennial power. I know, I get what you're saying about the results matter. I 100% agree with you, but where the basis of using the wins and losses is strict fact of who's better, who's worse, is that if you look at every football team in college football, there were only 2 teams that at their best, the way Georgia played in the national championship game, had a chance to beat them. And that's Ohio State, because Ohio State almost beat them in the semifinal, and Alabama. No other team on a good day for Georgia had a chance. Because Georgia, when they played Kentucky, like you mentioned that it was a 16-6 game. Georgia was horrible in that game. They barely tried. Their offense was garbage. I know Kentucky's defense, it doesn't matter. They didn't put their foot on the gas. That was a slugfest game. Georgia did not play their grade A game. Georgia almost lost to Missouri. People would have made the argument that Missouri was better than Georgia because they beat them. It's not how it works. Georgia on a good day could only be beat by Alabama and Ohio State. As much as I love parodying college football and I love college basketball for the reason that parody exists. College football is way too top heavy with the same teams winning it all the time. I still love the sport. But you look at last year, only Alabama and Ohio State could beat them on a good day because Georgia on a good day was unbeatable almost. No one else could. Tennessee had no chance. You saw what happened to Tennessee. They played Georgia, lost by 2 scores, and Georgia didn't even play their best game, and Hendon Hooker was playing in that game. LSU got floored by Georgia. Those teams weren't better than Alabama. They weren't better than Georgia. I know what you're saying. I'm just saying that as an objective, unbiased opinion of teams, that those were the 3 best teams in college football. Again, it was Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State.
I agree with everything you said, but the problem is the results on the field matter above all else. We can't just throw out results. And unfortunately for you guys, Alabama had 2 losses. What I'm saying is in a 12-team playoff, what I think is going to happen is Alabama, as a 10 seed, is going to go on that quote-unquote Cinderella type run. And they're going to make the national championship game. And then what are people going to say? Are people going to say, oh, this is a great system, explain in the playoff, get out a bunch of people to all the representation people wanted? Or are they going to say, man, I can't believe Alabama's back in the national championship game?
Well, the issue is because what you're saying is the real is that you were, like you said, you're agreeing with me that Alabama's most dominant. And what's going to end up happening is that Alabama will still be better, and they'll have those 2-3 losses because it was the SEC, and then they're going to play a Kansas State. And as long as Alabama's players are playing in the game, they're going to blow out a Kansas State. They're going to blow out those teams most of the time. And then they're going to make it. It's not a Cinderella, even though to your point, you're saying Cinderella because it's like in college basketball where you're a 12 seed. I get that, but they're not a Cinderella based on the fact they're a perennial power.
Okay, forget the word Cinderella. Forget that word. Take that word out. Keep the rest of the analysis in there. Would you agree that Alabama could make that type of run? And do you think that run would be healthy for the sport?
Well, I mean, I think that overall, people are going to be upset because it goes to your and mine and a lot of people's point that the playoff system is flawed in the first place and is not going to really make a difference until these other teams are capable of beating Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. Until other teams are capable of doing it, it's not going to change anything. NIL is going to have to do it, or these teams are just going to have to get better, or Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State is going to have to get worse. And if they do, then they'll make the playoff better, even if it's still Big Ten SEC dominated, because at least you'll have different teams winning it. But until that happens, it's going to be the same results because of the fact these teams are going to keep winning. It's not going to change anything.
Right. I think Alabama as a 10 seed has a better chance of winning the national championship than the Pac-12 champ, the ACC champ, and the Big 12 champ. And my concern is that's only going to hurt the sport as a whole, because I think people are going to say the sport is more regional than ever before. Jackson, you haven't spoken in a while. What are your thoughts on this discussion?
Oh, about the SEC?
Well, yeah.
Well, I'm kind of just thinking about the Pac-12 thing about like San Diego State, SMU right now. I'm kind of thinking about how great that's going to be, if official. Like how fun it'll be to see, like, say, an SMU Oregon State matchup on Pac-12 after dark. That'll be something.
I got to say really quick to Mark's comment, there's no such thing as an objective, unbiased opinion. That statement is oxymoron into itself. And then you got Connor Johnson laughing at that subjective, unbiased opinion. There you go. You guys got me with the right dictionary terminology, but I am unbiased. It's unfortunate that the SEC is as dominant as it is because I like the other conferences. And I wish that it was more even like basketball. So you guys subjective, unbiased opinion. You guys are right. But
well, Jeffrey, I think the SEC dominance will continue on until perpetuity. I just don't see any way where the SEC doesn't lose control, because every advantage I see going forward is toward the SEC.
Oh,
I mean,
totally. But Darrell, what's your take on the possibility of, say, an SMU Oregon matchup at 9:30 on Pac-12 after dark? What do you think about that, man?
I'll be honest. I might watch a quarter. I might watch a half. But is that going to be something I'm going to circle on the calendar that SMU's playing Oregon?
no.
No.
Unless you're a college football fan of all conferences, and it doesn't matter, and there's like no other good game on at the same time. But there probably will be.
Listen. SMU, didn't they lose to BYU in a bowl game? I mean, SMU's not this great historic powerhouse. They're a middle of the road AAC team. That's what they all have been recently, with Tanner Mordecai at quarterback. I don't see either of those teams making any meaningful impact.
I just hope that Tanner Mordecai is not simping for somebody named Margaret.
But I mean, what are they? Would probably be like Washington State level good.
Well, I mean, the issue is, Darrell, I mean, because you're right, the addition of San Diego State and SMU is, again, nowhere going to make up for the loss of USC UCLA. There's no way it could, but they had to do something. They had that. I mean, they haven't even done it yet, but if and when it's official, they had to do something. You can't go on with 10 teams, I don't think, with every other conference having at least 12. And the Power Five, they had to add 2 teams. Like you said, neither's going to really be the biggest draw in the world. SMU, though, at least has the historical success and potential to get back there because they are putting a lot of money into their facilities.
Right,
and
but
I think that they could improve. But to your point, there's no way that it's going to be able to replace USC, UCLA, and it's not the biggest draw in the world. But they're going to have to get better, and I think they could.
I just don't see anybody saying, you know what I'm looking forward to? I'm looking forward to San Diego State playing Cal. I just don't see that being a reality. Anybody saying that. I mean,
maybe they'll look forward to it on like a Thursday night or a Friday night.
I mean, if that's the only thing, if they play Saturday night, I don't think it moves, or any time in Saturday, I don't think it moves the needle at all. But if it's the only game on a Friday night, only game on a Thursday, or even a Tuesday, I mean, I'd watch the game, but they're just mid-level programs. They're not. Have they either one of them been? When was the last time either one of those teams have been in the top 25?
San Diego State's been ranked every now and then last few years, but not that often. I mean, I think you look at the way that the conference realignment is going, though. It's going based off of a tier. You look at the Big Ten and the SEC, adding the top teams in USC, UCLA, Oregon, or not Oregon, but Oklahoma and Texas. And then you look at the Pac-12 and the Big 12, that they're losing their best team. So they have to bring somebody in. Big 12 is adding BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston. And then you've got the Pac-12 adding SMU, San Diego State. Who else is there to add? Unless the Big 12 and the Pac-12 combined together, there's no one else to add. Like you said, it's not a big draw, especially for an SEC fan. No SMU, Oregon is not a big draw, but there's no one else really to add.
Well,
what about like a Boise State
question, Darrell? Your question about when the last time SMU was in the top 25. The last time they were in the top 25 was Week 10 of the 2021 season. And the 2021 season for San Diego State was the bowl game they played in.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah, so they were both last ranked in 2021.
Hey, that's good for them. And I know San Diego State's got this awesome new football facility and stuff, but I just don't see them being a national mover.
Well, I mean, they kind of have San Diego somewhat all to themselves, with the exception of the Padres. Because, I mean, there's no San Diego Chargers anymore. There's no San Diego NBA team. There's only the Padres and San Diego State. And it's so unfortunate that the city of San Diego has been getting all this bad luck every time they have a shot at a title. But, kudos to the San Diego State basketball team, on how they played this season.
Yeah, they had a great run.
Yeah. I mean, I hated that they beat my Crimson Tide, but all the same, congratulations on a fantastic season. But the football team, on the other hand, looks pretty good. They got it really good.
Jackson, would you watch a San Diego State Oregon State game?
I could.
If it was the only game on?
Yeah.
Versus, what if you had like just a normal 3:30 window?
I can flip.
I'm just gonna be honest with you, Darrell. What I do when I watch, the games is I turn on the big game, and if the big game ends up being a blowout, then I turn it to something else. And if then that game's a blowout, I turn it to something else. So sometimes I can end up on one of the low channels and watching Conference USA football and MAC football. If it's the best game, if it's the closest game on, sometimes that's what I'm watching. So it depends. To your point, is it going to be the game I turn on first if there's better games on? No. But if the better game is not a good game, it's not close, then I'm going to flip it and watch something else. So
right. I agree with that.
Especially if I were to say, place a bet on the game, for example, then absolutely I'd get a hold of that game. San Diego State, Oregon State.
Right. I think they're fun novelties, and I think they would help the conference academic-wise, which is important, but I don't know in terms of athletics how much it would move the overall needle. And if the Pac-12 wants to be an academic powerhouse, then they can do that. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm more of an athletic person myself. But anyway, guys, I'm going to get going. Have a great rest of your night, gentlemen.
You too, Darrell.
That was nice talking to you, man.
And then there were two, I guess.
Yeah, it's down to the young guys.
Oh, look, the Jack Jeff show, I guess.
Yeah, I think that overall, football is going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to it. 141 days away. Like you said, when, true football fans, why everyone's here, watching the voice of college football. I'm glad that Mark let us all on tonight. It was really awesome. Everyone like and subscribe to Mark Rogers and the voice of college football. That guy works really hard.
40,000 subs.
40,000. So close. And hopefully get to 50,000 by football season or the end of the year. Mark is amazing. And, the community he's put together for, all of us that love watching college football and talking about it is amazing. And he deserves a lot of support, more support. He is fantastic for sure. But I'm glad that Mark definitely let us on. It was a lot of fun. But I'm looking forward to, college football season. It's not that far away. The thing is, it's funny that you go throughout your day-to-day life, you're doing stuff and you're watching some other sports if you're interested in other sports, and you just realize you're getting close. It's not that far away. And it's going to be interesting with all these moves. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. I think that overall, college football is still going to be a fun sport to watch. Even with all the moves made, it still should be a lot of fun. There's a lot of stuff to talk about for sure.
Oh, yeah. And, when it gets to the month of June, that's my favorite month of the year, because then it's that time to go to Publix, and then, bam, Lindy's magazine, and then a few weeks later, got to make that order for the Phil Steele magazine and write my little predictions on there.
Oh, yeah. I think what makes, sports so awesome is that even when, you have the off season, there's still so much to talk about. It's not one of those things where once it's over, it's over. It continues. And I think that in recent years with the portal and, all these other things going on, that there's just so much more to talk about in the off season. And it makes it fun for people like us for sure. But it's people that work and they're doing sports, coverage. It's kind of exhausting. There's almost no off season, but when you love it and you love talking about it, it's worth it for sure. And I think that, that's what makes, sports so awesome. Thank you to you, Mark, for sure. He said, thanks, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Listen to you guys. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us on, Mark.
But yeah, I mean, I think that everyone debating San Diego State, SMU, I think that, San Diego State right now is the, bigger addition because of the fact San Diego State's a better team right now, a better program. But I think long-term SMU could have the higher ceiling if they can get their program back on track, especially now that they're going to a bigger league and they're putting more money into their facilities. I think that they have the potential to, raise the bar. And SMU could be, the better of the two additions. But early on, I think it's going to be San Diego State.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's pretty fun to think about whether you stay up till 1 a.m. to see little San Diego State SMU. That sounds pretty fun.
Well, I mean, the thing is with West Coast football in general and the Pac-12, it's tough because people are on the East Coast. There's more people on the East Coast, and they love football, but it's hard to watch, games at midnight when they got to go to bed, for stuff. And that's what makes it tough. That's why the ratings are worse.
Right.
Because, I mean, the Pac-12 people and people on the West Coast, they're going to watch, but you get more ratings if you get the people on the East Coast to watch as well. That's why when you have a Pac-12 game on at like 7:30, then it draws well usually. But when it's the late game, 10:30, and it goes off at 1:30 a.m., it's tougher to get really good, ratings overall because of the fact it is what it is. I mean, it's just very difficult.
For
There's not going to
sure.
be people watching and staying up late.
Yeah. Especially at like this hour, for example. Not a lot of people are willing to do that, but some of us are willing to take the team, take one for the team, just to be like, I can deal with the Pac-12 game.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's gonna be really interesting to see how, in the future, how college football shakes out, whether the Big Ten or the SEC just completely runs away with it, which they probably will, but how these other conferences can try to hang in there and compete. It will be interesting to see for sure. I'm gonna be intrigued on that.
Oh yeah, that is for sure.
You got any final thoughts or something like that?
Happy Good Friday, everybody.
Oh yeah, happy Good Friday. I mean, Easter's coming up. Happy Easter as well.
And the Easter Beagle is getting some treats out.
Oh yeah, I mean, you gotta love Charlie Brown. I mean, it's awesome, man.
Man, I can't believe it was 49 years ago that was made. Good Lord.
Yeah, or the Christmas special was made like
1965.
Yeah, it's almost 60 years old. Or yeah.
Yeah, it's
58 years ago.
Yeah, it's 50. It's going to be 58.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like talking about all these old football games. It's just wild. I mean, you think about how long ago, and some people watch these, and it's just 40 years ago. And I mean, 30, 40 years from now, we'll be talking about the games today, and they're classics as well. It's crazy.
Oh man. So it's gonna be fun getting to have some candy, some treats, all that stuff.
Yeah, but I definitely I had a lot of fun tonight. I mean, I would love to keep talking football. I mean, it's definitely getting late, but I mean, like I said, you got any final thoughts on football before we I guess hit the hay?
Oh, I got all my final thoughts. What about you, man?
I'm like I said, I'm about good. I appreciate everyone for watching Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, and I appreciate Mark having us on. It was a lot of fun tonight. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't expecting to come on tonight and talk this long, but Mark, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for bringing us all on. It was a good time. It was a lot of fun.
We appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much, man.
So much fun, and you're awesome, Mark, and everyone in chat is awesome as well. Again, get this guy to 40,000. Got to do that, but yes. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Mark deserves it so much, and I really appreciate being on. It was a lot of fun talking about the Pac-12 and the SEC and all of college football. But I had a lot of fun. I can't wait to be back on here soon talking to Mark and all you guys as well.
Oh yeah. Like, comment, subscribe, click on notifications. See you next time.